Right. All right, good evening, everyone. I see that it's about 5:03, so we'll go ahead and get our meeting started. The first thing that we have this evening, we have a special joint workshop between the City of Schertz Council and our Planning and Zoning Commission. So after I call the meeting to order of the Council, Chairman Richmond will need a call to order to the meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission. So at this time, I'll call to order the Council meeting. Mr. Richmond? Here.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Call the special meeting of the Schertz Planning and Zoning Commission for Tuesday, September 15th to order. And all commissioners are present with the exception of Commissioner Glombeck. Oh, and Commissioner Evans. Two are not with us.
All right, very good. So you have a quorum as well. That's good. What I'd like to do, if I may, is skip down, and since we have a meeting going, I'd like us to start with an opening prayer and the pledges of allegiance to the flags of the United States and the United States, rather the state of Texas. So ask Mayor Pro Tem Fowler if you would lead us in the opening prayer, and then we'll go back to the workshop agenda.
If you would pray with me. Father, as we meet today, these two very important groups that we have in our city, as we look to the future, as we look at planning and zoning, as we look to how we want to see our city to grow, Father, we need wisdom. We need a vision. We need to have a vision of one. And Father, we just pray that with the different abilities of each person that's here, will be able to bring their ideals to the forefront, and that we can integrate these concepts, that we can look at them and evaluate the good ones, and also be able to evaluate those that seem unwise at this time. Lord, it's your wisdom that we seek, for we ask these things in Christ's name. Amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Under the Texas flag, I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Fowler. All right, the first item that we have on the agenda for our joint workshop is a discussion regarding the proposed 2012 ICC building codes.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, the way I think staff anticipated this is, again, as council directed, the idea was have council here as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission, who's been involved in crafting these ordinances, as well as the builders. And so the idea is to do a much less formal sort of discussion so we can have a dialogue. And so again, I mainly will try to limit the amount I talk to allow everybody to kind of have their say going forward. But before we get started real quick, let me bring Lisa Wood up here real quick, something unrelated, so give me just a sec. As I think was announced at the last council meeting, the city's planning department applied for the Texas American Planning Association Planning Excellence Award, and we were notified that they had received that, Lisa and Bryce, for the second year in a row, and that last year was the first time ever that we had received that, so that was quite the honor. But I think kind of with Lisa and Bryce's mindset, one of these things that they said is, look, we didn't achieve that by ourselves. It took a lot of folks helping us in terms of being supportive. Council, other departments, as well as the Planning and Zoning Commission. And so one of the awards that they said, you know, we really should maybe throw in to recognize one of those people that helps us is the Texas American Planning Association has a Planning Commissioner of the Year award that they give out to one planning and zoning commissioner in the state every year to recognize their service. And again, you can imagine how many planning and zoning commissioners you have across the state of Texas. So, unbeknownst to this person, but known to many of you who signed letters and sent them in, Planning and Zoning Chairperson David Richmond is being recognized this year with the Texas chapter of the American Planning Association Planning and Zoning Commissioner of the Year Award. We thank you quite a bit, and so we'll have to talk with you a bit after this. All right, so with that, we'll sort of get going. I'll get Ms. Oh, do you want to say something? I'm sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to say thank you, whether it's now or later, but yes, that was totally unbeknownst to me. I certainly appreciate it. I have enjoyed my many years of working with the planning staff and with the councils that have been seated, and look forward to more years ahead.
Thank you.
Again, thank you very much. I appreciate it.
You're going to pull up your PowerPoint and I'll kind of
sir.
start talking. So one of the things that we did, as you recall, we came forward to City Council with the update of the city's building code, trying to go from the 2006 to the 2012 International Building Code. And the builders had a number of concerns and issues associated with that. Some of those, frankly, had to do with the local amendments that we have with the code presently, and then others, frankly, centered around process in terms of the length of time it took to get through the permitting process for single-family plans. I will say this to Gil Durant and his folks' credit. This is Gil and Carl, Lonnie, Jim, as well as the permit techs, Debbie Krause, Bernice, Patty, and Michelle. They actually got caught up. So there was one day, and it may have gone for 2 days, about 2 weeks ago, where there wasn't any single-family plan waiting on staff review. So again, if you saw our whiteboard, we whittled it down from probably 50, 55 single-family permits in process to where we had one column and had about 15. All of those we had sent comments on. Now, the builders have been kind enough to resubmit quite a few more permits, and I think, in fact, just to let you know, in the month of September, and we're only halfway there, I think they've turned in about 29 new single-family plans. But our goal was to get caught up, because we felt like if we could get caught up, we can stay on top of it and have a reasonable turnaround. And then that will let us now start focusing on consistency, which I think has been an issue with the builders, and it's been an issue with staff, of making sure that the process, they know what to expect coming in. They're not getting comments out of the blue, that as we start realizing things we need to do, that we can kind of better inform them of that and roll that forward. So just to touch on that. So with that, let me hit on maybe the items that were the biggest issue, and if you want to kind of roll through the PowerPoint as I talk and chime in too, Michelle, that we had. The first one of those, and that's again a little bit of process, but one of the current local amendments that we have requires an architect to basically seal the plans for a single-family home. It's a local amendment that we've got that's not required in the building code. And so the problem that created is all of those different sheets and all of those different drawings, the buildings were having to get an architect to seal those, and whenever they made a change to one of them, maybe somebody said, I want to redo this room from being a sunroom to being a bedroom or whatever, or I want to flip it, it required them to go get those sealed again, and also staff was spending a lot of time making sure that all of those were appropriately sealed. That's a local amendment that, as Michelle mentioned, we've had since before 2000. And again, I think one of the things that we've been able to do is, as we've improved on plan review from a staff perspective, there isn't necessarily any value to be gained by having that architect seal all of those single-family plans. Now, again, the foundation still needs to be sealed by an engineer. Some of the things with wind bracing and things like that, that section needs to be sealed, but not every page in the plan. And so when they make some modifications, they're not having to come back with everything. And so again, from a staff perspective, we're fine with that. It probably gains some capacity for us. And the key is we don't feel like our residents lose out. Those key elements will still be sealed, but you just don't need to have the all-encompassing set. Now, for the commercial stuff and others, the state still has those requirements of when those plans need to be sealed by an architect or engineer, and that will defer to the normal practice of the state in Texas. The next one, really, and this again, I would thank all the folks doing foundations. When we had the Fairhaven issue, we imposed a requirement that the design engineer had to be on site for the pour. And you may recall the idea was there was frustration on the part of residents that, hey, the design engineer was saying, I did a good design, must have been a problem on the pour, and the guy doing the pour was saying, I did a good pour of the foundation, not sure what he was designing, can't tell you where the issue was. And it was really, frankly, just problematic to have a PE, an engineer, standing out there as they would describe to us, or sitting in a truck watching concrete be poured. And so in terms of working with the folks, what we've come to is to say it can really be a representative of the engineer that is on site. So you still have that link to the engineer to make sure it's done consistently with the plans, but it's not the engineer themselves. And frankly, I think what we've said is it's probably somebody who's a little more knowledgeable about what's supposed to happen with concrete being poured, and in fact we can get a better quality control and still have that assurance with the future homeowner that there was somebody kind of checking both steps of that process. Now, Michelle sent you a draft with the foundation stuff. I will say they were kind enough to give us some more cleanup, I would call it, on that. And so again, most of those I think are to improve the wording to be more consistent with standard language. One of the things that they said is with regard to the rough grade away from the foundation, we again, if it's a post-tension, that has to be done after those are pulled and cut, but you can also have a surveyor attest that the drainage is appropriate. So you don't need the engineer to do it. A surveyor can come out and say, yeah, the drainage is right. And again, you will remember that was a big deal because I think everybody sort of acknowledged one of the contributing factors was there wasn't appropriate drainage away from the foundation, and that was adding to some of the problems that I think we were having going forward. So those were really sort of the two big ones. The other thing we had was some concern about the sound attenuation. And again, we're going to do a presentation later on the Randolph J. Luce document, but let me kind of lay out what the sound attenuation requires. When you're in that defined area of the noise with the high enough decibels, you have basically two options. One is you can comply with sort of the prescriptive standards that say if you use these kind of materials and build this way, you're fine, that's all you have to do. If you don't want to do that, then you can build it with a different way with whatever you want, but you've got to have somebody come out and essentially test it and certify that it reduces appropriately. So again, if there's a house that they meet those prescriptive, there's not a reason to come test. The idea is to get it down low enough to meet. You know, again, you may have an issue with somebody down the road saying, hey, this one room's a little noisier than it should be, but they met the requirements. So the idea is you have an easy way to do it and a more complicated way to do it. So with that, I will say what we're proposing is you've seen the draft. We're going to come back in with some of that additional cleanup language to that foundation section that I think is, again, more consistent with their terminology that's non-substantive next time. And at this point, I'll sort of be quiet, answer questions from you guys, and maybe let some of the folks here chime in with their thoughts on how we got to this point, and then we can use the bulk of our time to talk about what do we want to do going forward to, again, improve the process, improve the product, reduce cost, reduce time.
So what if we may, what I'd like to do first is defer to our friends on the Planning and Zoning Commission, let them first ask questions or make commentary as they'd like to do, and then we'll just continue. It'll be a little bit of an iteration back and forth amongst the staff, the Planning and Zoning Commission, and the Council. So Planning and Zoning Commission, if you'd like to. Questions?
Point of order. Do we need to?
No. Actually, we hold on just a second. I'll come down and visit with you. But let me let them go ahead and get started. Questions of points of order can be brought by those that are in one of the two bodies and only then. But I'll happy to come down and check in with you. But Mr. Richmond and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
Any commissioners have any thoughts? Questions?
I think one of the questions that several of us had was on the sound attenuation. The flight path is going to change, and the noise abatement is going to have to be taken care of. Problem we've got is nobody has an idea of what airplane they're going to use. It's not even on the drawing board yet. So this is going to be a rough way to try and figure out what the noise levels are going to be. They have no way of test flying anything. It's going to be a big problem. The foundation problems, again, that was predicated on Fairhaven. I can agree with most of what you've said as far as not having a specific engineer on site. That is a little bit testy at best. As long as they use the test blocks and they are tested and keep the foundation flowing, graded properly away from the house so that we don't have the water problems. Those were two of the biggies, and the other was the using fill that came from off-site.
And all of those things are still in there. And again, I think there's generally been support for those. Again, the real change is a representative of the engineer is the one on site. And again, I think as we've learned, the folks that they plan to have out there probably have a little more knowledge than an engineer who sits in an office typically about what to look for. That's right. Yeah. And we've still got the fills and the soil testing.
It's my main comment is regarding the changes on how we're dealing with the foundation issues. You know, the Fairhaven was a significant problem that we've had in the city, and you know, for me as a commissioner sitting here and as a homeowner in the area, you know, my biggest concern for these new homeowners is that if there's something that goes wrong, that there's a way that somebody can be held accountable. And by having a representative there, if staff and everybody feels that that is something that can be accomplished that way, and it makes it a little bit easier for the builders and developers to conduct their business, then I'm fine with that.
Yeah. And we think so. Again, it says a representative of that engineer, so they're beholden to them.
Brian, when we spoke this afternoon, I believe it was, I asked about having enough inspectors to help make sure that the citizens get the representation they need to make sure their houses are constructed correctly, which kind of ties into the making sure they're not jerked around on a slab, which is kind of a major part of a house. Mm-hmm. Can we figure out a way to get some help, more help, 3D print more gills or something?
Well, yeah, no, I appreciate that. And again, just to update P&Z on what we've done, again, we have two contract firms that are helping us right now with plan review. One guy that comes in the office, one we send the plans out to. One of those firms that we send out to, we are now contracting with to do inspections, because when we got that inundation of plans, we then get all of the inspections that go along with it. We filled one of the positions we had vacant, but one we still have vacant. Now again, credit to City Council for your action a couple weeks ago in terms of the class and comp study. And again, I believe there's an increase for that position as of October 1st, another bump. And so once we get that, we'll repost with the new salary. Hopefully we'll get somebody in. And as I've said, we will keep that contract folks on as long as we need to thoroughly and adequately train our folks. And to be blunt, we may want to keep a bit of a relationship with them just so as numbers go up, we can respond more quickly and they're familiar with what we do. We're not sure we want to sort of cut them off entirely. We want to keep them because it seems like a good way, if they're familiar with our system, that we have the ability to respond quickly to increases in permits. And I will say, one of the challenges is the builders submit them in batches. So, you know, they don't come in one day with 2 and the next day with 2 and then 2 days later with 2. They tend to come in, often I think staff laughs on Friday afternoon was 7 or 8. But it works for their system, and we need to respond to our customers' needs to say, hey, look, we pull all these stuff together, we get them cleaned up, we bring them to you in batches. It's the best way for us to work. And so we just need to be very nimble and having that to call on to say, hey, we just got in, 2 builders came in today and they dropped off 13, 14 plans. Get the contractor to come back in and pick them up. Otherwise, that stuff is going to start to lag, because clearly if we fall behind, it's harder to get caught up than if you're caught up and you just stay focused on knocking it out.
Thank you.
Brian, my biggest concern kind of piggybacks on Mr. Crawford's. And I voiced my concern to the council back on the meeting on the 19th of May, and we've discussed it in our further deliberations, but it still is in the draft, and for the record, I'd like to say that I still have a lot of heartburn on exempting permits for residential work that, to me, is construction, and it's as close to constructing a residence as you can get. My 20 years experience both on planning and zoning and also in my homeowners association suggests that one of the things that the city has prided itself on during that span has been able to provide, through the permitting process, assurances to our residents that quality contractors are performing quality work in our city. And for many early years, we were chastised because everything took so long to get through the Schertz process. Every other city seemed to do it quicker. Fortunately, that didn't bother us, because quicker is not the answer in most cases. But we stood our ground and we maintained that quality, and I think that helped many residents make up their mind at the end to come and live in Schertz, build and live in Schertz. To me, this is Pandora's box. If you open the box and you grant exceptions for anything, you'll never close the box. And the draft suggests that replacement fences, like for like, and no permits for detached accessory structures. We have in our subdivision several detached structures that are concrete foundation, brick 4 walls, windows, roof, a small house, if you will. Construction is the same. And if you're going to, if we're going to say that a permit's not required because it's within the dimensions of 10 by 12 and 120 square feet, I have a hard time understanding how that is different from building a house. The tough sheds and things like that are one thing, but most of the construction in our neighborhood of accessory buildings have been permanent and not temporary. And my concern with fence and like for like is there are a lot of varieties of cedar fence. You can have pickets side by side, you can have basket weave, you can have open air staggered pickets. And again, there are a lot of contractors that visit our residents during the wee hours, if you will, and offer services that are performed not well, and then the contractor is never available after that for the resident to go back. The big advantage that our residents, I think, have today is when they know that the city of Schertz has permitted the work, they have a permit in hand, they know that the city will stand by that work. And if it's not properly performed, they can come back through the process, they have something to stand on. And I think if we start eliminating permits like for like, fences are going to soon be added to with roofs and who knows what else. And a like for like, to me, is not really the answer, because in some of our older subdivisions, fences still stand, but you couldn't find the pins to relate to the survey if you tried. So a new fence installed improperly is quite possible. But again, I think if the permitting process continues as it is, will ensure the quality of work continues and the city will stand behind it. So, as I say, that is in, I guess, Section 1861, where permits, building, and electrical and so forth are discussed. But those ones that relate to buildings, I have a lot of difficulty in suggesting that we ought to approve that.
I think one of the things that really concerns us, and I know my case in particular, all of our utilities are underground in the older section of the city, and they're behind the houses. They're not in front like the newer ones are. You dig a fence, if you're not careful, you're going to hit an underground power line, and you're going to be a crispy critter. The permitting process wasn't meant to make money. It was to ensure quality and to ensure safety, and that's the biggie. If the individual does it himself and hits the power line, didn't ask for a permit, i.e., like the gentleman next door to me, I don't have a problem with him being a crispy critter. He should have checked first. And again, like David said, if we eliminate the permitting process, this is going to be a big problem. Again, 80 to 90% of the city was built with everything behind the house, not in front.
Commissioners, anyone else before I open this to council? We can come back around to council.
Yes, sir.
Comments, Mr. Edwards.
Brian, what is the justification for going the permitting process?
Sure. And to be clear, let me say this. I can certainly respect that position. You notice I got up with the foundation and said, hey, I don't think there's any loss of anything with requiring a representative on site. And I didn't say that with that. In fact, I think said the opposite. Yeah, we will probably have cases where somebody builds something with the shed or a fence that is a problem. But the goal of it is those are permits that homeowners tend to find fairly frustrating. They view it as a fairly nominal thing. Now, a couple of points of clarification, because I think we did listen to you with some of the initial comments. If you want to put the storage shed, and again, limited to 120 square feet, and it's storage sheds, playhouses, and the like, the foundation for that, if you want to put down a concrete pad, you still have to come in and get a flat work permit for that. So we would look at, make sure you don't cut into the ground and hit a utility or something like that. The other is if you wanted to run electricity to that building, our interpretation will be you're not building a storage shed, you're building a habitable accessory structure, and you've got to come in for a permit for that. So if you want to plumb the thing and have electricity run into it, we'd say it's not a storage shed, that's where you keep your mower and your tools and your things like that. But to be clear, I will agree that the risk we run is that because folks call up and say, hey, it's a shed, do I need to pull a permit? We're going to have to train our folks to say, it's a shed up to 120 square feet, you can't be running electricity or plumbing to it, and if you want to do a foundation, you got to permit that. There will be cases that people don't get that. They talk to a neighbor, yeah, you don't need a permit, and they will do things that are too close to the property line, that have that concrete. We acknowledge that. It really is a weighing of the risk with a convenience to the homeowner. But again, I appreciate the comment, and I'm not standing here saying we won't have problems. In fact, I said the opposite. We will have a case that you will get called on, and you will get called on with a neighbor going, how are they able to do their fence this way? And we go, yeah, they didn't build it like for like, they moved it over, and we have a problem. That kind of comes with it.
So next question, Brian, is this. You mentioned representative. When you keep saying representative of the company doing the foundation, I'm assuming, what are the certifications, or what kind of representative are we talking about?
To be clear, and again, this is probably something that they would want to chime in and add some information, but it is a representative of the design engineer. So the engineer that designs the foundation, their representative, someone under them, they've contracted with, works for the same firm, would be the one out there to say the foundation was poured correctly and tell the engineer that. So it's not the engineer themselves having to stand there and see it, it's somebody that's working for them, if you will. The other thing that, you know, we talked about, let me find the section here real quick, because what we didn't do on that section is we didn't necessarily put in a requirement for any sort of certification associated with that. So again, if it's a guy who's been doing this for 30 years and he really knows his stuff and really knows it, but he doesn't have a certification, if the engineer is comfortable relying on him, the engineer can rely on him to do that. For some of the other positions that we want to make sure where you're stressing those cables, that's where we want to make sure that, again, those folks have the certification requirements going forward. And again, we added, you know, the post-tension foundation must be inspected by a post-tensioning institute, slab-on-ground installer, stressor, or a level 1 or 2 unbonded PT inspector prior to placing the load on founding and going forward. So not during the pour, but as part of this post-tension, there are requirements for that person to be certified because they're actually overseeing the work, I would say, as opposed to simply monitoring or witnessing the work done according to plan.
Thank you.
John?
Brian, do our permits come with a utilities locate for somebody replacing a fence when you get a permit?
No, not for a fence.
Okay. So the problem Mr. Greenwald was talking about, we need to maybe require them to do a utility locate so nobody's hitting power lines and water lines.
We certainly could do that. One of the problems we have with regard to really the shed, though, is you can't put the shed in an easement. So our ordinance says, and again, some of you on council have gotten calls from neighbors saying the city's crazy, they won't let me put up a shade. And very often it's because across their backyard, they've got an easement and they can't meet those space differences. Fences typically go into easements, and we just have not had a problem with somebody going deep enough on a fence post where they've created a problem. I don't know that I can think of one here since I've been here. Gil?
No, sir. What they would do is call 1-800-DIG, and then they come out and they serve anyone that's digging in the ground anywhere in Texas, be it a homeowner, be it a contractor, should be calling Dig Tech to have them come out and identify and locate all underground utilities before they commence digging. That'll solve almost every problem, and that's something that we do press. We have handouts, and most of the contractors are well aware of that information.
I just want anybody thinking that our permits came with, okay, here's a permit, go ahead and dig. And there could very well be wired out. They don't guarantee that there's nothing in the ground.
We don't require that coming in. That's correct.
Mr. Thompson?
In regards to the comment on the noise and the jets and not knowing what's, maybe our gentleman from Randolph could help answer this question. On page 12 of the 2015 Randolph study, it said the USAF TX program will begin in 2017 and expected to be fully operational by 2023, describes the TX aircraft, what its capabilities are, and then likely to have a larger noise footprint. So we're presuming that what is stated here in the study is accurate and that TX will transition in 2017 or thereafter?
Before we go there,
Okay.
that's the third bullet,
Yes, sir.
more so than,
Okay, I was responding to the commissioner's comment on the noise.
If I may, Mayor, maybe I can, or I can be quiet.
We can.
No, it's fine. Listen, if we're talking about building code stuff that is here now,
are.
then that certainly ties in. I just want to make sure I don't get a nasty look from my
Yeah.
city
And
attorney
we
down
can
there.
hold off till later on that too.
Yeah. So what we've done, though, is with the building code, the sound attenuation covers the current noise contour in the JLU study. Again, what we would anticipate is that at such time a new jet was designed and we had new noise contours, we would come in and amend this with the new noise contour going forward. But the problem is nobody has any clue what that'll be, and it would be entirely speculative. So we're going with what's in the JLUs now.
Good. Mr. Fowler?
Thank you. I'd like to just comment on something I think Mr. Cedric had mentioned about the representation. The term itself, as it stands, is pretty open-ended. It's going to be up to the individual companies to say what a representation is. And I would prefer that we come to an agreement in a definition of what a representative would be for an engineer. Whether it's going to be, you said like a guy that has 30 years experience. Well, it may be a company that comes out there that the guy's out there doing the job only has 2 years experience. And I think we need to set some guidelines for that person. Whether, you know, if it's a representative of the engineer, I would expect him to be someone who is from the department, and he works with that engineer and has the approval of the engineer for that guy to be his representative.
Yes, sir. And to be clear, you know, what we think, the way we word it, and again, in some ways it doesn't specify the requirements, but by saying it's a representative of the engineer, we think that should help the homeowner if there is a problem in the future to go back and going after the engineer on a design issue to say, your representative, the representative of you who designed the foundation was out there when this thing was done and didn't raise a flag on the pour. And so we have other sections that we need someone with a certain amount of training, but this is really to tie back to the engineer, the design engineer, what happened on the pour. But I can appreciate your comment, certainly.
So let me ask this. It says here, the engineer must provide to the city of Schertz a letter of final acceptance stating that the foundation has been placed in compliance with the design prior to issuance of the certificate of occupancy.
That's right.
So it's not the representative that's, his butt is not on the line.
It's the engineer.
It's the engineer who's on
Yeah.
the line, regardless of who that representative
Yeah.
is.
So again,
Whether he's got 2 years or 30 years experience.
that's correct.
Okay.
We assume the engineers are all going to make sure the guy who's out there, because they're on the line, knows what they're doing and is watching for it. They have a self-interest to regulate that as opposed to us dictate in that case. But other things, we do include those criteria for certifications.
I want to make sure I let Mr. Fowler finish up.
Yes, well, one more comment about that. In order to, I think, eliminate possible litigations after the fact, if we can come up with some type of definition in there, to me, that would be a positive for the contractor as well as for the city and the person who's buying the house. The other comment is on the noise. You gave two situations. One, a standard to meet the certain qualifications for the noise abatement of a given noise level. And the other was allow the contractor to design however he wants, and then it has to be tested. Then if we're going to allow that to happen within our contract, then the definition, there has to, I believe it needs to be a definition in there that whatever that noise level is, that there has to be a direct reduction of the noise inside the house whenever they do the when they do the test. Because I don't believe that needs to be so open-ended if we don't have something in there that a guideline that they have. I don't know if there's a standard for that, but if there is a standard, it needs to be quoted.
And yes, sir, it's all, again, all habitable portions of structures located within the 65 dBA as shown on the exhibit, must be designed to either achieve an outside-inside noise level reduction of at least 25 weighted dBA. Okay, so again, it's a very particular standard. And then the options for compliance, again, may be demonstrated one of two ways. And one of those, in this case, is use of simultaneous noise readings of instantaneous outside and inside noise levels in accordance with the ASTM E966 to ensure the structure achieves an outside-inside NLR of at least 25 dBA. So if you want to go that route, I think we've done what you want, which is say this is specifically what you need to reduce it to and how you need to meet it. Frankly, I think most folks are going to go the other route and say, yep, we'll build to these prescriptive requirements and don't have to test.
Yeah, I believe what I've seen in some of the new construction, I believe that. Now, that is that particular STE, what is it, ASTM, is that limited just to a 65 dB? Or what if it was the new aircraft comes in and it was 85 dB? Do they still have to meet the 25 dB requirement in the house?
And again, the way the noise contour works is it's a 65 dB. If again, with the creation of a new airplane and new studies done on the noise contours, and if they come in with more nuanced kind of levels and say we want to adjust those, we want to reduce it to make a more stringent standard, then that would come in at that time. But again, at this time, what we're going with is if you're in the 65 dBA or greater, you've got to reduce it down to those areas. Now, again, to be perfectly honest, one of the things we're going to talk about when we get to this next item, and I won't want to go too far, is in implementing the JLUs, there really need to be a series of tools. So if you've got really high noise levels, you shouldn't be putting houses in there to begin with, and that's really the appropriate tool. It's not to sound attenuate it further. It's to say, if the noise is that high, don't put houses there. What we've said is, here are these areas that it's noisy, it doesn't preclude a house necessarily, so you sound attenuate. But if it's higher than that, again, those other things we're going to talk about later would say, don't let people put houses there. It's too noisy in the backyard. It's too noisy getting in your car. You can't attenuate enough reasonably.
Well, since you're going to get a new aircraft and you know that the noise level could possibly go up, I think we ought to have something in there that would at least address that as a potential problem. That's
Yes, sir.
all I have to say on it. Thank you.
Mr. Zeus?
I'm going to comment on the noise, then I'll go back to my original request to speak. On the noise level, you know, in 1984, 85, somewhere in that area, and you said it very well, and quite a bit of complaint and fuss was in the media and the newspaper almost on a daily basis regarding San Antonio International Airport and the houses, and they can't go to sleep. You know, I look at it as just an average Joe. When I drive by and pick the lot to build my house, I look at an airport. What did you think I was going to deal with? Or buy a house next to the railroad track, or, I mean, the military or some outfit will come up with an airplane that will shake the crap out of your windows. You know, we actually, not at fault, you decide you want to build a house next to the airport, or we allowed you to. So that's my opinion in that. That's not a solution. We could do the noise level to as many degrees as you want, but it won't be. You know what? I want to thank the commission, and I want to thank the home builders and the engineers. I want to thank y'all for this. Is really refreshing to listen to all of this, because I think we have a common ground. I can't really sit up here and say I think this is wrong. I agree with the engineer not to be present, and believe it or not, you know, nothing towards engineers, but I'd rather have somebody qualified to know. Don't look at me bad. I'd rather have somebody, the engineer assigned, that knows about slab and pouring slab, because the engineer doesn't have no authority whatsoever, which is zero, to tell everybody stop pouring, stop pouring. But the ultimate inspection is up on us, because we the one that protecting the residents and the citizens of the city. So we make sure it's done right. That's for that. But when it comes to the fences and the sheds, I know Mr. Richmond and the commission have concern regarding the permitting, that we have to have a permit. but like for like is really a thing to do. I could name a couple of incidents with shed. I could name one particularly with the city of Schertz, our city, our shed, that, but with the permitting process, and I want those guys to be busy inspecting buildings, inspecting roads, inspecting infrastructure, not go out and wondering where the cinder blocks is going to be and then the shed. The homeowner, if I'm a homeowner, I don't give myself, just the credit. Every homeowner is pretty smart about how they're going to spend their money. So if they want to spend their money in a good fence, they're going to make sure it's a good fence before they pay for it. If they want to build a nice shed or buy it built, some of them, all those sheds nowadays, they just come and tack them together. They're nice. They're great. So I really think that's a good idea also. And I just, to reiterate, I'm hoping that we'll all have a common ground. This is a fresh breath of air. Thank you.
Very good. We don't have it set on the agenda this way, but this is of, I think, of enough public interest that unless the council wishes to tell me I've lost my mind, which is their prerogative to do so with 3 votes, what I'd like to do is kind of treat this like a public hearing and give everybody that wants to speak on this matter an opportunity to come forth and do so. This is worthy of some discussion. So what I'm going to do at this point, even though it's not on the agenda, I'm going to allow for folks to come forward and speak. However, priority is given to those who signed up to speak this evening, and I believe I have 2 folks that have signed up so far. I believe the second person to sign up is really here for the council meeting, not for the joint meeting, because it says that the agenda item or subject is about ATF forms, and I don't think we're covering ATF forms in the joint session. So first and foremost, Clayton Morris, it looks like it reads, is Clayton Morris in the room? If you'd like to come forward and speak, I'd be happy to have you come forward, and then we'll have everybody after that that has not signed up to come forward and have an opportunity to speak on this matter before the council. Look for, in general, when we have a public hearing, although it's not posted exactly as a public hearing, we generally look for 2 things. One, if you state your name and your address for the record, and second, we generally ask that people keep their comments to 3 minutes, but the way that the rules are written, I have some latitude there. So, Mr. Morris, if you'd like to have some commentary, feel free.
Absolutely. My name is Clayton Morris. My address is 24906 Roosevelt Court, Tomball, Texas, 77375. First off, I noticed that you reiterated 3 minutes, so you must be aware of me and how I normally speak, but I'll keep it short, I promise. I know I actually have a Tomball address. You may be wondering why I'm here, so I wanted to let you know that why I am here. I manage operations at DPIS Engineering. I'm very blessed, and I only share this for the purpose I believe it's relevant, that I started at this company when I was 19 years old. I've worked here for a long time, and I've since been very blessed to become a partner of this company. So I understand the responsibility of being an engineering firm very well, because quite honestly, it's my family that's on the hook for every one of these slabs long term. We're on the hook for everything that we do, and we take that responsibility very seriously. We've been very blessed to do work all around the state. We work in Austin, Dallas, Houston, San Antonio, Schertz, of course. We even work in Tennessee. And we recognize that every municipality has developed rules for a reason. Quite generally, they weren't developed just because somebody thought one day, hey, this would be a great idea. We've recognized that generally they realized what wasn't working, and they came up with a plan to fix it. I've met with most of the people in this room, either corporately or individually, to discuss these items, because we've got engineers in here, we've got builders, and we've got many that aren't represented here personally today, but they are represented collectively. I will tell you from a market share standpoint, we do several thousand homes a year, and not in a bragging way, but I'll tell you we have 0 failures, and that's because we understand the responsibility. And honestly, there's not enough money in any industry to tolerate failures. I have a 2% failure rate, and I will be out of business. And I literally have 5 kids, and I literally do not want to be out of business. But I don't want to develop I'm very candid, forgive me. I don't want to develop a Mickey Mouse set of rules that won't work for anybody either. Because I think that's one of the fears, is that, wait a minute, we were having slab failures, and everybody started pointing at 15 different people. I believe one of the most important things that we can do is have an engineer of record on the job for your slab portion. It is very standard in residential construction and even commercial construction to have an engineer of their own respective right take responsibility for the portion that they are engineering, and then for them to have their people on site, a representative. Because quite honestly, I manage the engineers and I manage the inspectors. And I spent several years out in the field. My inspectors are better than my engineers at looking at a home, as one of the points is brought up. Flat out, if I put them on a job, they couldn't hold a candle to my guys that are in the field every day. And vice versa is true. I believe that having an engineer of record for the respective portion of the home is important, simply the same way that when we go to a doctor and we have a problem, we go to a specialist in that own respective right. Well, we specialize in foundation and framing. There are other engineers that specialize in wall bracing and framing. And so I believe that we need to get the players to the table who truly care, who are going to stand behind it. And I believe the most important way the best way to have that accountability is to have that engineer certification on file for that address. And I don't mean it the way this sounds, but regardless of who he puts on that site, his butt's on the line. And we need to hold him accountable. And that's what we do. I've spent my entire day here today because I try to coordinate my travel, and we met with our builders and we said not just about this issue, we said, what are you seeing out there? We are going to tighten up our policies because we want to continually retrain our guys. I have 5 trainers that travel this state continually to make sure my guys are doing the right job, because I can't afford for failures to happen. So I want to make sure it's good.
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else that would like to come forward, please stand and come forward. And again, if you would offer your name and address for the record, and we'll certainly hear from everyone.
Hello, Mayor, Council. My name is Jim Leonard. I represent the Greater San Antonio Builders Association. I live at 401 Holland Avenue in San Antonio, Texas.
Thank you.
I want to, first of all, compliment Brian James and his staff. Ever since our last council meeting back in late July, we've worked continuously on many of the issues that have already been brought forward to you tonight. Mr. James has been very professional. He's a true asset to your city. You should be lucky to have him. Working with Michelle and Gil and others, we've been treated extremely well at their plant and facility, and just want to continue to reiterate the solid working relationship that we've created with the building department here. Our plan is to continue that by holding quarterly meetings where we can really ratchet down into the weeds and talk about some issues that will come up from time to time. As we move forward in our building homes, things will happen in the inspection process or permitting, and we want to be able to resolve those issues by holding regular meetings to be able to address things like that come up. Mr. James has agreed to do that. We already do that in some other cities. It works quite well. The building department understands in those cities that we're true professionals, and we're really looking out for the best interests of the homeowners as well as the city themselves. So we work together in a coordinated effort to make those things happen, and we look forward to those meetings taking place with Mr. James in the future. We also told you at the last council meeting that we wanted to be a resource for you as well and offer solutions. And to that end, one of the things that we've done in the past week, we spent several weeks setting this up. One of our engineering firms set up a concrete testing seminar to be held at the Builders Association this past Saturday in San Antonio. In fact, one of your newly hired inspectors attended that class. It was a 3-hour workshop. They paid for the class. They were given booklets and went through a whole series of a full-day seminar in preparation for a concrete testing exam that will take place this Saturday. There were 25 people that came to the class and paid their registration fees, and over 50 are signed up to actually take the exam. One of the questions that was brought up and was asked by Mr. Fowler had to do with, well, what are the qualifications of the inspector? Who's going out there to do this? And you know, is it just some guy that works for the engineer? How do we know what this guy's qualification is? We've gone back and forth on a few different draft versions as we've tried to work our way through this process. And in the most recent one that we've done, it says in here that a qualified inspector shall have concrete field testing technician grade 1 certification from the American Concrete Institute, and if a post-tension foundation, level 1 or level 2 unbonded PT inspector certification or slab on ground installer stressor certification from the post-tensioning institute, or shall be a professional engineer licensed in the state of Texas. I think that gives you all the cover that you want and all the qualifications for the person that's out doing the inspections in the field. And whether that's a 22-year-old Texas A&M engineering graduate or somebody that's worked in the field for 30 years, you have this as a backup to know who you're getting in the field and what level of qualifications they have. So we asked that to be added to the code. I know this is in a draft version right here, but it's something that we worked on so that you do have the fallback protection, that the people that are out there in the field doing the work are truly qualified and know exactly what they're doing. Ultimately, as has already been mentioned, the design engineer is the final say-so on the matter, and he's the person of record that you can go to, or any of you can go to in the future if there's a problem with the slab that was built or how the home was constructed. You have that person to fall back on. But for simplification purposes, these are the people that the engineers would like to have out in the field that, as has already been stated by one of the engineering firms, they're better qualified, they know what they're doing, and they trust them implicitly to do that work. A couple of other things that, as we've gone through and trying to wrap this up over the last few days, a lot of emails have gone back and forth between myself and Brian and with Michelle to clarify certain issues. And I think we've reached agreement on a number of things that have come up in the past. So we're here really to tell you today that we support a lot of what's going on, the way that was presented today. We're ready to move a lot of this forward and get it approved by you in the next 2 weeks at the next council meeting. A couple of other things that did come up that I want to address. There is, regarding the JLUS studies and the sound contours, one of the things that we asked for in one of the early workshops we did with the city was to be able to include a map in the exhibits regarding sound attenuation and what had to be done. And the map shows the contour lines on it. So anybody can pick that up that's thinking about building anywhere in the city, if it's a private individual wants to build on his own lot, and he can see what those contours are and where they fall in relation to his property, and then have a better understanding of what it is they have to do to be able to meet that code. So we asked for that, we got it. It's part of the, it is part of the draft now. As contour lines may be modified with additional equipment and more power, more speed, more sound later on, then you know, that's something that can certainly be taken up in the future. But for now, the sound contour lines are defined, and they'll be part of the ordinance and included in that. And one of the things that Brian mentioned, he said that there are two ways that you can meet the sound attenuation ordinance. One is that you can use the items specified by the manufacturers and put those in, and you don't have to do any testing. Or you have the option to use certain materials that may not be specifically listed and then have those tested. And you see that in a lot of documents in a lot of neighborhoods. And what that does is it allows for new and advanced building techniques to be used. So if somebody wanted to build a great big custom home and they wanted to put in some special unique things, they might not be things that are specifically listed in the ordinance, but with engineering testing, we can certify that those things meet the code. This very same thing came up in San Antonio with regard to the sound attenuation ordinance around Camp Bullis, because around Camp Bullis, it stretches over to I-10. You've got subdivisions like the Dominion, some very high-end neighborhoods, and some of the products listed were quite frankly inferior to what some of the builders wanted to use for the type of homes and the price point of homes being built in those areas. And so what they did was some of the doors and things like that, they wanted the glass didn't meet the decibel rating that was required, and there was no way to even test that. So we went through a long process working with the city and working with the U.S. Army out there, and came up with some materials in that would qualify and meet the ordinance. And quite frankly, the same things may come up. There's testing on glass windows, not so much on glass doors, as an example.
So we're a little past double time. Council, you have any objection to continuing time here? I mean, I think this is useful information. No objection. Please continue.
Okay. Well, I'm about to wrap up anyway. It'll just be another few seconds or so. So thank you. As I said, most of the major issues I think have been agreed upon. We will continue to have small ongoing issues. That's just the nature of the business, and it's an activity that takes place in the elements and in the weather, and and things come up. We've had, as I said before, great cooperation from Brian James and his staff. Council has been very, very progressive in their actions in delaying the process, allowing us to have more time to vet it out, come back to you with some real solutions, and I think that's what we've done over the last few weeks, and so we're happy to move this process forward. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir. Please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, Council, Planning Commission, and City staff. My name is Greg Asvestos. I'm with MLAW Structural Engineers, address 12930 Country Ridge, San Antonio, Texas, 78216. And for the record, if I may, I signed up, I think, 9 people through Ms. Dennis, and I thought that was the procedure, because when I got here, there was no sign-up sheet. So I'd like to make sure that all of the people that we did sign up that are here will indeed have the opportunity to speak, so we are in compliance with your rules and regulations.
Plan to let everybody speak that wishes.
Thank you.
Issue needs to be.
Thank you, sir. The efforts we put forth have been now for a couple of months that we've been going through this. The last time we were here was before council. Mr. Edwards was the mayor pro tem at that point, and in your absence, sir. If I may, just a couple of comments, and then these other people that will come up and they will address certain issues just as they have addressed both at Planning and Zoning Commission on 2 occasions and in front of City Council on another occasion, and with city staff on several occasions. So I will defer to them, so if you guys are prepared for your own notes, please do so. What I'd like to do is open again that we are here as advocates. We're not here as adversarial relationship. We're here to educate. We heard from City Council and other people. Where were the experts when Fairhaven happened? You know, the experts were there. We're here now. So we're here to provide the information, and we hope that, again, this is a non-emotional environment, and it is a very educational environment. We've delivered already, as we said, about educating people about concrete. Your young man, what's your new, what's it? Lonnie. Lonnie was there for 3.5 hours last week. Also, Mr. Morris was there in the class, and I was in that class. And I'll tell you what, I couldn't pass the ACI Level 1 concrete tech test at this point. So that's one thing. So we're here, again, not as adversarial, but advocates. The second thing I'd like to do is there was an extensive discussion by Planning and Zoning about permits. We are moot as it relates to permits. They don't impact builders, they don't impact us as well, they impact you as a city, they impact the staff, and they impact y'all. If I may, that was really never discussed at when we were there at Planning and Zoning about the permit issue, and your Planning and Zoning passed that forward to City Council with all of that permit language in there. So I think from a perspective of discussion, Planning and Zoning probably should have spent a lot more time, as emotional as you people are today, about permits at that particular time. We have no consideration about permits because that's post-construction. Third thing I'd like to address again and reinforce the fact the design engineer, with the language that Jim cited, there are letters that have been sent and emails to Mr. Brian James that indicate exactly the language we're looking for. And as Councilman Fowler indicated, who is the person specifically there? Jim letter addressed who that was very specifically, a PTI individual and also an ACI certified individual. So taking the design engineer off the site, very important to us, and the rough grade issue we've talked about. So again, I'm not going to reiterate and regurgitate things over and over again. The JLUS, if I may, just in closing, my comment, that map was added only after discussions with this group of people, that your staff and your planning and zoning saw that as an important issue. We realize that is important. The military are very, very important to this community and to this city and to this region. And we appreciate them and we thank them for their service, and we are appreciative on every front for their efforts and their contributions. So I'd like to close with that, and I thank you very much for the time. I respect your the provision of time, and I'll defer to whoever our next speaker is, and if you all just come up and address the issues that are important to you, please.
Next up, anybody, we don't have to go in any particular order, it's as you wish.
My name is Joe Lales. I live at 9418 Antoine Forest in San Antonio, Texas.
Thank you.
I want to express Liz. She was here a while ago. She's seen a great improvement in the process. She wanted me to let you know 180 degrees. She submitted permits on Friday. She picked them up today. So it has changed, and the email process is working on the updates on the permits. So all that is working real good. I believe there's also less inconsistency on the reviews. You know, nothing new has been coming up, so it's been working out pretty good. I think we're at the point where we're getting all the information needed to you to do the review. You know, the next part of the process, and me and Jim talked about a little bit, is the once we get the permits packages set up, how does it affect the field? How does it affect your side? And we talked a little bit about that, doing electronic as well. All right. So no, the process has improved quite a bit. It's ongoing. There's other items I'd like to talk about or swap options during the new adoption of the process. All right.
Thank you, sir.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Tim Pruski. I reside at 26227 High Timber Pass, San Antonio, Texas. I just wanted to elaborate a little bit more on the sound attenuation. I think we've made some headway with it the way it's written. There are a few items we still need to tweak as far as it's got some mislabeling and stuff like that that I pointed out to Brian that will get worked out in there, so that way if you build with these building requirements, you don't have to get certification, or if you build with different requirements, then you need to have someone certify that. The way this final draft is written now, it doesn't say what we're talking about, so I just want to make sure that we're aware of that. And then he also mentioned that they're going to make, per your zoning map, they're going to go ahead and put those contours, label those contours on there, so we have more transparency with public building city officials, so everybody will kind of know where they're at versus have to dig through a lot of something on the J list is that no one knows where to find this information, no one can see this information, and so we've worked very hard, and he's going to go ahead and move forward with that. Once that, you know, if y'all pass this, that'll be labeled on your website. Another thing I wanted to talk about that's not on the agenda or items is entry monumentation signage. You'll talk about the quality of life and how proud y'all are of your community, but when you drive there, you've got these wing walls that on one entrance has the commons. I'm just using, or has Cypress Point, but then when you go to the next entry where you have a monumentation, there's nothing. There's no identification of that community, and that's something that we're going to work with as we move on, and something we bring up that, you know, we need to have some continuity of being proud of those. We're not trying to bring these big old signs, but we need to make sure that they look like communities that everyone can find direction to versus that main entrance. So thank you for your time. Thank you for your efforts, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Who'd like to be next? I got more folks on this list. While we're waiting to see who wants to stand up next, first I'll thank Colonel Baldwin and Colonel Eisler for joining us this evening from Randolph. Colonel, you want to be next?
Thank
Welcome.
you, Mayor. Thank you, Mayor Carpenter.
Thanks for joining
Thank you, Mr. Kessel, and to the council members. I'd like to address the question about the mission in the upcoming piece and just be responsive to the question on that. But first, I'm extremely thankful for the support of Schertz, the Schertz city leadership, and your community planners that have worked extremely closely with us. And Mayor, I'm extremely grateful for your personal investment for going up to Austin and testifying on two important pieces of legislation to help maintain our mission space here. So I'm grateful for your citizens and the care that you provide our airmen and our families and our mission. So thank you for that. I'm here just because we want to be a good neighbor, and part of that is sharing with you, yes, we are noisy, and so I'm very grateful on us being able to provide you information about the noise that we generate in your community and to provide you in whatever format that you think is helpful, and thank you for being able to provide that to your citizens in a way that's meaningful for them.
Several folks in the room, including me, are smiling a little bit when you say that you're noisy. To me, it's like an angel's lullaby, and I sleep very well as I hear those jets fly, so I don't think they're very noisy at all, but please continue.
Yes, sir. And so one of the questions was, is your noise profile going to change? And so we've had the fortunate of taking our first T-38 arrival in 1964, and for the foreseeable future, until 2023, we'll be flying those same T-38s, the one that got here in 1964, on the same profile. So for the next 8 years, and that'll be 60 years of continuous service that we'll be flying that. At that point, we should, in 2023, right now, the TX will be selected to replace the T-38 one-for-one throughout the command. We should have the first squadron of those right now. The selection happens in 2017, and we should have the first squadron operating full up here in 2023. All versions of that prospective platform are significantly more weighty, 1.5 to 2 times the weight. And because the performance characteristics, the thrust is going to be significantly more than a T-38. And as we've seen with the Joint Strike Fighter and F-22, in full disclosure, it's going to be more noisy. And so the investment that you're making right now in making sure that your citizens are protected from the noise, you're going to see returned on that investment no matter what platform comes in here. What that will look like in the future is probably a growth of the noise contours. But as you see right now, the noise contours are kind of centered around the runway. And no matter what airplane it is, it's going to land on that runway. And so they are going to stay there. How they grow laterally will change slightly, but they're going to grow rather than shrink. So banking on that, I think you're making a very good investment on that. And sir, I stand by for any questions on noise.
Very good. What I'd like to do, if I may, is just continue in this public hearing style, if you will, for anyone else that would like to come before the council and speak on this particular workshop item, and then we will turn everything back to the commissioners and to the members of the council. So anyone else that would like to address the council right now, please do.
My name is Richard Bowman. I live at 12303 Bonita Cove in Austin, Texas. I'm an engineer with MLAW. And I don't have a whole lot to add, except just to thank city staff, Planning and Zoning Committee, and yourselves for just the spirit of cooperation that I've experienced. There's been some back and forth with city staff on how to tweak the ordinance relative to residential foundation design. Actually, I've been looking at both commercial and residential, because as our firm, we get both. So we haven't changed the intent of the ordinance. We just kind of streamlined it. The biggest change you saw, Mr. James put the bullet points. We've allowed a representative, a responsible representative of the design engineer to do the pre-pour and the concrete. I can respect that. Representative needs to be somebody with some sort of credentials. So we have there are programs in place that we can point to for those credentials. The letters that we issue, the letters of compliance, one of them says, hey, I've looked at the reinforcing, we've looked at the beam depth, and everything is good, it's okay for concrete. And when I sign and seal that letter, that makes me responsible for the steel that goes in that hole there. So, but it would be nice to have all the inspectors knew what they had credentials, but yeah, that was just what I had to say, was to thank the city council and staff and planning and zoning for just kind of working with us on the issue, and we look forward to continuing with that. So, thank you again.
Very good. Thank you, sir. Anyone else that would like to address the commissioners and the council? It's not a public hearing, so there's nothing for me to close, so if we need to come back, we certainly can. But I'd like to open it up this time back to the commissioners and to the council. Commissioners, comments, questions, additions?
I'll direct this at Brian James, please. We've talked a lot about the slab.
Yes, sir.
Have we made any changes or recommendations for amendments to the International Code with respect to the soil testing and design of what the slab sits on to make it better?
No, sir. We've essentially carried forward the local amendment that we passed in the Fairhaven batch of ordinances. So again, we have more stringent requirements there than is passed for by the code. Again, I think the builders will probably say, yeah, there's more cost to it. But again, I think most folks sort of acknowledged why we have it, and there's probably some value and benefit to it.
Thank you.
I think that's all from this side, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, sir. Council? Mr. John?
I just want to add to Mr. Richmond's point on the small sheds. You might consider doing the permits on the homemade ones, just for the safety issue, possibly. I'm not sure about that.
Okay.
Next thing is, I don't know if you're going to have this answer, but on this concrete pour, let's just go through a scenario. Somebody comes out, does the inspection, the pre-pour, the engineer's there to watch it being poured, and a couple years goes by and the house sinks, fails, whatever. What should the homeowner expect at that point?
Sure. A couple things that the homeowner can expect, and this is one of the big changes that we passed. And again, this is frankly in response to comments we heard from some of the homeowners and frankly staff looking internally and saying, yeah, we didn't do as good of a job. The first thing they can expect is to find all of the records associated with the construction of their house at the city that we can provide them going forward. So the letters provided by the engineer, the plans, things like that, all of those certifications, staff will be able to provide them. We store those electronically, and so the homeowner can find those. Now, again, I'll be real blunt. One of the frustrations we heard from the homeowners is that, you know, often when they buy that house, there are requirements to go through arbitration as opposed to going through litigation. And certainly that still is up to the homeowner. Again, what we've tried to do is take an appropriate level of involvement for the government. And so really from our perspective, it's let's make sure we keep all the documentation. Let's make sure we have reasonable regulations so that, again, we've done the soil testing so the engineer can do his job, that there's a connection between the components that are all designed by the engineer that go back to them, that we have qualified folks to do some of the construction work going forward. So again, I can't tell you what the homeowner should expect, but I think what you heard from the homeowners before is they felt very frustrated that they were dealing with this issue, not able to make any headway, and frankly, they just didn't have enough information to kind of even know where to start. So I don't think we'll get homeowners coming up saying, hey, because of these changes, it's made it real easy and I've solved the problem. But what we hope is that they say, I found all the documentation and the information, and my home builder was much more willing to sit down and have a dialogue with me because we were able to look through that and maybe tie back why there were some problems.
Indeed. Council, others?
I do want to say thank you, Mr. Pruski, for bringing that up about the additional monument signs. That was extremely knowledgeable. We thank you for that one.
Mr. Fowler?
I want to appreciate the response to some of my comments already. I think you can see that we're pretty much on track and thinking alike, and we're more interested in making sure not only are you protected and safe, but a resident can live in a house for a long period of time with confidence. And so I appreciate the efforts that I see going on with the PNC and the council and the contractors out here. I think this is a good start. I look forward to seeing it in the future, how it works out. Thank you.
Very good. Mr. Thompson?
I just want to say I'm very pleased with the practical applications of what has come out of the last few weeks. Having a quarterly meeting between Building and Home Builders Association, having a map of the sound contours, having the possibility of continuity on entrances to subdivisions. I think it's amazing what can happen when people with that common goal get together for the benefit of the city.
Any others? Commissioners, you would like to return? Feel free. Please.
Again, Greg Asbestos, San Antonio, 12930 Country Ridge, San Antonio, Texas. Just to go to Mr. John's comment about the home all of a sudden being built, engineer on site, and the house sinking, okay? It obviously doesn't happen that way, and I know you wanted to truncate that, but one of the key things, and I think that DPIS will address this, we can address this as MLAW, is that there's a process that's involved. In that process, there's a way of dealing with a warranty issue on the front end. As soon as you start seeing symptoms, okay? If I may, someone made the analogy about going to the doctor or a specialist. We don't wait till we drop dead to say, you know what, I don't really feel that good at this point. So if I not start feeling good, I'm going to say, you know, I want to go to the doctor. So the same thing is true with your slab. So if the slab starts either edge lift or edge drop or tilting in some way, you can see that. So the idea is raise my hand, Mr. Builder, I've got a problem. There's two things that come into play. One is what we would call a level B warranty, which is some attempts to resolve, find out what the problem is, because my neighbor might be Mr. Edwards, and Mr. Edwards wants the greenest lawn in the world. So he just waters and waters and waters and waters, and the rough grade, back to what we talked about, wasn't right. And where does all that water go to? My slab. So my slab starts doing this, but he's got a great green lawn and he's happy. I'm in trouble. So you need to start looking at those slabs when they start to show symptoms that you can deal with that issue at that time, and then and work with it on a warranty issue. Then you continue as a process. Again, if I have a headache, you're not going to cut my head off, I hope, okay? So what we want to do, then there's another issue about warranty, and then there might be a prescriptive way to fix this if there is some adjustment to slab or issues. And then at the end of the day, most of the builders today all have a structural warranty, which is what's called a 210. And that structural warranty is also in place. So don't feel that you're abandoning your residents in any way or throwing them out, you know, as sheep to the wolves, okay? These builders, MI Homes that are here, DR Horton Homes that are here, Bella Vista Homes that are here, did I miss anyone else? Jim Leonard with Greensboro Custom Homes are here. They have a procedure and process that are there, and the warranty is a component of that process. And you really can't get a mortgage today as a builder unless you really have a 10-year warranty. That's one of the components I think that you're going to look at as well. So, Mr. Johns, I think your comment is very, very well taken, but there are procedural issues here, and I just want to share with you, I think things have gotten much better, and again, I thank you all for your time.
Thank you, sir. Again, council, further comments, questions on this one? Commissioners? In that case, I'll make a couple of quick comments. So the first one is this. The reason that I asked for the latitude from council and from the commission to allow folks to speak is this. There's not a simple answer. There's not a silver bullet answer that says if we do this, then we have solved problems. We are trying very carefully on the Planning and Zoning Commission and on this council to balance the rights of builders, of engineers, developers, residents, potential residents, and the position of government amongst all of those things. It is a delicate balance. A person that owns a piece of land in the state of Texas in the United States has a great deal of right. Things they can do, things they can choose to do. There's also the interest of the community in the aggregate. There's also the interest of the community in the aggregate in being business friendly. All these things have to be carefully balanced. So I would say that there is never an untimely discussion that's had by planning and zoning or by the elected members of this council about any of that. And if we take 6 months to get this squared away or 6 days or 2 years, as long as we get it right, then we've done our job. Right is difficult to define and can change over time. There's nothing that we can do in any of our ordinances that will absolutely anticipate all potential outcomes, problems, or issues. However, we do the best that we can. So I guess the point of my commentary is this. We may get to a place here shortly where we amend our building codes, where we amend our ordinances, and it won't be the last time, and it is an iterative process that will go on far after most of us are dust in boxes. But I must say that my last thought here is this. In the end, we as a community have chosen to be what's called a Texas Home Rule City. And you'll hear me say it again and again, sometimes to people's pleasure and sometimes to their displeasure. It means it's our home and we'll make the rules as we see fit. And that is how that will be. And that will be based on input from the Planning and Zoning Commission, from this council, from our business community, and from our residents. That said, I think that we'll move on to the next item that we have, which is a workshop discussion on deferral of all public improvements. Mr. James, I think you'll probably be, Ms. Wood, you may be leading us which is great. Mr. James had a lot of time to talk there on that first one. And folks, if you'll excuse me for a moment while staff gets started on this, I'm going to hand this gavel to the Mayor Pro Tem, and I've had too much water.
So thank you, Mayor, Council, Mr. Kessel, Mr. Zeck. It's good to be here again this evening, Mr. Richmond, and all of our commissioners also. Because this was held as a workshop at our Planning and Zoning Commission on August the 26th, as well as last week at City Council, I'm going to keep this presentation fairly brief so we can get dialogue between the two, the Commission and the Council. So just quickly, as I said, there were workshops held, and we discussed the deferral of public improvements. A quick summary of that is that prior to approval of a final plat, construction plans have to be submitted to the city for public improvements, and then prior to filing the plat, the city, all the public improvements are installed, and the city accepts those. We have had, over the last probably year, quite a few people coming in asking for deferral of public improvements. And staff has had a really firm position on these agreements, because some of the agreements have been for over $500,000, and some of them can be for $22,000 for one improvement itself, for instance, sidewalks. But overall, we've had a few people come in wanting to defer all their public improvements until after the plat's been recorded. And the concern for staff has been, if somebody comes in and they actually are ready to go, they're ready to mobilize on the site, install their public improvements, start with their private construction as well, we feel like they're well on their way to working through getting that business set up, and the risk is minimal compared to a speculative development. And so where staff has had some concerns, and where we're here tonight, is to seek input from our P&Z Commission and City Council to determine if our stance maybe is a little bit too firm, or to find out if maybe the council or P&Z has a different, idea on the way we should go with this. And so to kind of quickly wrap it up, the things that staff has been concerned on with speculative development is that there's potential risk involved. Basically, if it takes a couple of years for this to happen, because generally these improvement agreements or community facility agreements, generally the time period in the language of the agreement is for approximately 2 years. For unexpected conditions on the site, shortfalls, if the contract falls through or the agreement falls through. There's staff time cost associated with managing these if there's default. Also orderly development, the concern with 3 lots together where you have the one in the middle who wants to defer their public improvements and the 2 on the outside who are ready to go. And so then we have this gap where maybe the water line or the sewer line, those are some of the concerns that we have. But then on the other side, we want to consider the developer and where they are in the process, and they want to be able to sell their property and, go ahead and they don't have anything ready to go. They're not ready to put a business there, but they want to go ahead and start marketing it and go ahead and sell it to somebody and then go through the process of doing that. And so for residential properties, we have kind of held very firm because we don't want people selling lots to folks and not having any streets, water, sewer, et cetera. And then those people who own the property are like, hey, I need this to be able to make my house work. So it seems very logical. But on these commercial projects, the larger projects where there's a lot of the risk, it feels more. It's not so minimal. It feels a lot more when we start talking, and money's, $500,000, $1 million of this public and infrastructure that staff would be making decisions on, and we wanted input from council and P&Z and kind of get a feeling of the direction that the city wants to go. So, thank you.
Very good. Looks like my return is timely. The good news is I remember us talking about this before, so I'd like to do the same thing. I'd like to go to the commissioners. and hear comments and feelings on this particular item before we open to council. So, gentlemen.
We had a lengthy discussion on this when it came before P&Z Commission, and we know there are pros and cons, but we think that the staff is definitely doing the right thing, particularly on the residential side, to hold the line. And when you look at the commercial side, we think that the risks to the city do outweigh the risks to the builders. And when you start talking about speculative development, you're again kind of opening the door for any and everything. It's one thing to have that. It's another thing to have Walmart or Amazon or somebody like that come with a plan in mind that they start with from the beginning. So I think we would feel strongly in favor of staff's interpretation of the language to continue to do just exactly what they're doing.
Counsel? Mr. Zeus?
You know, Mr. Richmond, you took all the words out of my mouth, so that's what I was going to say. So I really appreciate you. That's exactly what needed to happen. I agree with Planning and Zoning Commissioner, and I think we have to take that stand. I really think it's the right thing to do.
Mr. Fowler?
I pretty much agree with what Mr. Richmond has said and Mr. Asus. The thing was in my mind, what I was envisioning, that sometimes being able to defer some of these public projects would, if you do it too early, a lot of times you have to go back in and tear up something that you already made. So, you know, I see a benefit of giving them the flexibility to say, let me get my stuff in the ground where I want it, and then worry about the public portion of it, because now I can do it without having to reconstruct something. So I agree with the process. Thank you.
I just have one question. How often are we going through this process with individuals coming in for a commercial project or a large conglomerate coming in asking for that leeway? How often?
Yeah, so the last couple of years, it's the number has picked up. I would say this last year, we probably have had half a dozen people come in and ask for this. We have entered into one specific agreement for a larger project, which is the corner store on 1103 and 35, because they actually had a building permit ready to go. They're ready to mobilize their crew to start work. The other projects have been small ones, for instance, the deferral of sidewalks, which seems logical if the public infrastructure, they're not actually ready to do the improvements there, and the city has the ability to accept the money and put those improvements in a little bit later. So probably half a dozen times, but I can see the trend seems to be we're getting more people asking, and so that's why we started to discuss approaching the two groups so that we could get direction, so that we don't get a lot of these coming in and we're saying no, and then they come up and say, hey guys, your staff keeps telling me we can't do this. And we wanted to kind of start dialogue between all of us so we were on the same page, and so we have a policy in place that keeps us all together.
Well, I agree with staff that we should hold the line to the residential, make sure we keep that going. But I also agree with Mr. Richmond. We've placed our trust in planning and zoning and our staff to go out and make decisions. And this is one of those projects where I think you kind of own it. You've actually given it some ownership. So thank you, and I think we go forward, Mr. Mayor.
I got to say this. I got to give the inspection department a great deal of credit, and Mr. James, he got beat up so bad by me many times regarding permitting, and now this is good, James, it's very good, about permits and all that. And then I hear the news that we issuing permits in a timely manner. Some of them is really impressive. I want to thank y'all for doing this great job, and I hope we continue doing this for our community. I really do. I want to thank, closing my statement, the Planning and Zoning Commission. They stick to their guns in a lot of issues and that help our city move forward and be a better city. And I want to thank you again. Okay.
Thank you.
All right, that said, any other commentary from the commissioners, from the council? Mr. Thompson?
Are you satisfied with the answer we gave you?
Yes, sir, I am.
Okay.
And was it clear?
I felt it was clear.
Okay, I wanted to be sure. Very good. Yeah, the bottom line is with any kind of speculative work, you know, if the deal is good, if the private sector is coming forward and wants to make an investment, if the deal's good, they'll do it. If it's not good, they'll ask for concessions. If they don't get it, hopefully they'll take it to another city, because that means it's probably not a good enough deal for this one. Thank you all. I appreciate it. We'll move on to the next workshop item that we have then, and that is a workshop discussion and update regarding the Joint Land Use Study, or JLUS. Mr. James.
Thank you. Let me pull my PowerPoint up here. As many of you know, staff has been working for the last couple of years, as well as Councilman Fowler, Mayor Pro Tem Fowler, with regard to the update of the Randolph Joint Land Use Study, the JLUS as it's been referred to. And what we want to do is, because that document's been approved, is we want to generally talk to you about what's in there, kind of broadly speaking, to get some direction as we go forward on implementation of this. And so, again, just to let everyone know, the purpose of the JLUS, it's undertaken to guide planning and development in local jurisdictions around, in this case, JBSA Randolph. So it really is a document that's to guide decision-making on things that impact them. And it's critical to ensuring compatibility between future land uses and the base. And that works in a couple ways, to be perfectly blunt. One is so that we don't do things that negatively impact the operation, but frankly, as you know, the men and women of our armed forces, they put their lives on the line, and it is a dangerous business simply to train for that going forward. And so because of some of those inherent risks, we as the city need to understand that and make informed decisions about what is appropriate and not appropriate around the base because of those inherent risks associated with what they're doing. So it really is twofold. I will say the JLUS effort was headed up by Bexar County. Stakeholders included JBSA Randolph, many personnel there, the local jurisdictions, the cities, the counties, the MPOs. There were some other partner agencies that were involved at various times with that, and then the general public, including residents and landowners. Again, Mr. Pruski, who you saw here, was part of that effort going forward with that. So again, what comes out of this effort is a document that, again, Randolph can't necessarily make happen. It's up to the cities and those other agencies to make happen and bring about. And so to be clear, in 2000, there was the Randolph ACU study, which was essentially the previous, back a couple versions. I will point out a couple things. One is in the APZs, the accident potential zones, and these are some of the areas sort of at either end of the runways. Residential units were limited to generally 2 units per acre or half-acre minimum. No residential units were allowed in the APZ-1s, which is closer to the runway, and there were guidelines with regard to land use restrictions and things like that. There were provisions for sound attenuation in high noise areas as well as some implementation for heights and obstruction controls. The UDC was amended at that time to create an ACUS overlay district and noise regulations. And then back in 2008 was the most recent amendments. The regulations or the recommendations really in the JLUS were similar. We amended the UDC in a slightly different format to make the ACUS a special district that's referenced per the study. And one of the provisions there is that a rezoning in those APZs required a positive response from Randolph. I think one of the challenges staff would say is that the way it is now in the UDC, it's this sort of reference to this document that doesn't include all of these various standards and criteria. It doesn't include the particular sound attenuation, doesn't include some of the references for light, doesn't include some of the restrictions with regard to uses and floor area ratios and things like that. And so it's problematic in that it's difficult for staff necessarily to implement, but it's also really practically impossible for a property owner to understand what regulations are going to be imposed. And so that's one of the things we want to do a bit different here going forward. So again, the first update for this workshop was held in October of 2013, the last in July 2015. So again, wasn't a short process, involved a lot of public involvement. The development of the JLUS had an executive committee and an advisory committee that worked to pull the document together. Schertz, again, had representatives on both of these committees. Mayor Pro Tem Fowler and Bob Cantu were on those, and they provided comments along with staff, Lisa and I. And then again, there were quite a few conversations between city staff, including the city manager, as well as the folks with Randolph Air Force Base and the Consultants Matrix Consulting Group who developed it. To get where we are. So one of the things that is really the gist of it are a series of strategies in the document. Those have time frames for them. 1 to 2 years, 3 to 5 years are sort of ongoing. The strategies are sort of defined by type, maybe acquisition of property, maybe capital improvements program, maybe communication and coordination between cities and Randolph, maybe real estate disclosure, etc. And then each strategy is assigned an entity primarily responsible for that. So in some cases, Bexar County maybe, in some cases Randolph. There may be things particular to Schertz that we're the primary entity. And then a lot of them have secondary or supporting parties that are supposed to participate. So again, not all the strategies involve Schertz. Again, they're geographic centrist. And one of the key ones is that Bexar County is to head an implementation task force, which is, I think, a good idea to kind of keep us all honest and focus on this to make sure that progress is made going forward. A couple of things when you read the document, just to describe some terms. The ACUS is the Air Installation Compatible Use Zone. That's really some of the big land-defined areas that are impacted by Randolph. We have the accident potential zones, and that may be what you're most familiar with. I'll show you on a graphic in a minute. But those are sort of the rectangular APZ1 and APZ2 that are both north and south of the runways directly at either end. We've also got the clear zones. The clear zones are the ones right at the ends of the runway. Much of that property is controlled by Randolph. One of the recommendations is to expand those to a uniform 3,000 by 3,000 square feet. And so some of the areas in the new clear zone isn't owned by Randolph. And so that's one of the implementation strategies. But other components include the noise contours, imaginary surfaces, vertical obstructions, and bird strike hazard relevancy areas. And again, those are typically to deal with the fact that you need to keep things of certain heights out of certain areas because of the way the planes operate. And so again, to point out to you, and I apologize for my cough, maybe somebody would be kind enough to grab me a water here because I'm running out. But what you can see on the graphic are the yellow are the clear zones, either end of the runway, then you've got the APZ1s, and then you have the APZ2s in green. So they're fairly large areas that we're talking about. We talked a little bit about the noise contour with the building code update because we included the sound attenuation. And you can see much of the older part of our community, thank you, Bryce, much of the older part of our community is within that noise contour. And again, as you guys know who've lived there or know folks there, they get a fair amount of noise from those planes. We've got some of the operational footprints to again describe some of the height slope contours and things like that. Again, some additional diagrams. And I will say Tony McFalls, our GIS person, has done a really good job trying to map the topo we've got to kind of map these contours out to let us know where the restrictions are with regard to height in various areas of the community. And so let me kind of hit on some of the key strategies. One is alternate energy development. And again, so one thing that while wind turbines are great, while solar panels are great, we don't want to be putting wind turbines in the area where you've got planes taken off that would be in conflict. So we need to regulate that. So one of the things we need to do are pass ordinances, pass regulations to say, look, if you're in these areas, you can't put them there, you can't put them over a certain height. with solar panels, we need to make sure that there's not too much glare from those. You can have them, but if they're going to blind a pilot, that's problematic, so need to have a regulation on that. Some are legislative, and while not a Schertz strategy, one of the ones is to amend some of the real estate forms to notify buyers that they're buying near Randolph. Again, the problem we've often heard, somebody goes out on a Saturday morning, looks at a lot, thinks this is great, but much if you've lived by railroad tracks like I have, if you're not looking there when the train's going past, you think this is great, and then all of a sudden at about 1 in the morning, you're going, what is that? Why is the house shaking? What's going on? And so the same thing happens. So many of the criteria are designed to inform folks, and it's not just this, there's some things you'll see in a minute. Again, I mentioned light and glare, so we need to, again, go look at our lighting ordinance and make sure that everything is directed downwards, that it's shielded appropriately, that we're not getting too much light and glare to create problems for night missions and things like that. Okay. One of the strategies, and I will say I think Randolph has stepped up quite a bit here, is communication and coordination. But one of the legislative amendments is to allow Randolph to simply look at these applications for development that come in to say, hey, here's a concern we have on this. Now, we may be able to regulate it right now, or we may not be able to, but if we can't, we can at least put the folks from Randolph in contact with the developer to say, hey, let me walk you through and understand the implication of this. And so again, we've defined an area there, we've defined certain types of applications, and so Lisa Wood and the folks from Randolph have been really working to come up with a communication system by which we send them these applications. They send us comments back that we can incorporate as sort of a test case to get it up and running. So the big one, though, for us is the land use. And some of those strategies are to amend the UDC and the comp plan to include the military influence area overlay districts. So come back with overlay districts that allow us to enforce, much like what you just did with the sound attenuation, make that an overlay zoning. One is so that everybody is informed, the other is so that these particular criteria for height of wind turbines or things have an area that they apply. If you're outside of that, don't apply, don't have to worry about them. But they have to do with the APZs and the clear zones. Noise is a big one with the sound attenuation, vertical obstruction, and then bird airstrike hazard. One of the real problems they're having, frankly, and everybody's been out hunting these last few weeks know, are the white-winged dove out there. And those pose a significant hazard to the planes taking off. And so we don't want to be planting some kind of plant that's got a berry that really attracts them. Doesn't mean you can't landscape your yard, but again, want to make sure we're being thoughtful about what we're doing. And then again, dealing with the APZ1 and APZ2. So here's really the kicker. The biggest change for us is in those APZs south of the base, and I'll let you read it and then I'll go back to the map. In the APZ2, right now we allow about 2 units an acre. Because of some of those hazards in the implications thereof, the idea is that to go 1 unit per 20 acres for the east runway and 1 unit per 10 acres for the west runway. Now again, what staff is coming back in as well and push for is if we're going to do that on the sides, you need to restrict the area in between. So let me go back and show you the graphic that we're talking about. Okay, so we're talking south of the base, and you've got the clear zones, and really you have very, very limited, almost no uses can occur. Residential currently is not allowed in the APZ1, and it's the APZ2s that we're talking about. Now you're probably looking at that map and saying, wait a minute, Laura Heights is out there. And frankly, Laura Heights is one of the reasons this change came about, because I think what folks have said is they expected a more rural style development where kind of these half-acre lots and homes were scattered. They didn't anticipate people coming in with a suburban style subdivision where, again, you can barely see it, but if you know, you've got houses just lined up one after the other. So if there's a problem, a plane is coming in and boom, 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 and that's what we don't want to have happen. So again, because of the increased accident potential that occurs, and the folks in Randolph probably have called upon can talk about that, the recommendation in the JLUS is to substantially restrict development there. I think from the city's perspective, it begs the question, if we understand these hazards exist, what obligation do we have to wisely plan for our development going forward? Now, let me go back and talk about a little bit about what staff's thought is on these. So it would continue to not allow residential in APZ1, limit the areas between the APZs, as I said, much like if you're outside, because frankly it's problematic to really limit development here, have a bunch of intense development in between. One is the city. For us to simply serve that area is problematic, but again, while these are theoretical lines, to assume that things won't go in between doesn't make a lot of sense to us, and so amend accordingly. Now, one comment I'll hit just real quick is for areas not in the city limits, the recommendation is to consider a joint airport zoning board to regulate those properties. It doesn't really apply very much to us because there's very little area in our ETJ that's in these areas. But certainly where you have some larger areas that are in other communities' ETJs may make sense to do something like that. So there's zoning authority, if you will, similar to zoning authority, as the city attorney doesn't look up on that one. So what staff is recommending that we consider doing, just as we've kicked this around and said, wow, what's the implication of going such a low density on this side of effectively 1518? You may recall that most of what we have over there is, it's kind of rural development, about half-acre lots, and that would sort of all go away with this. Ironically, the other side of 1518, the bulk of that area kind of down from Lower Seguin has a minimum 5-acre lot size per our comprehensive plan. And so the obvious solution to us to sort of balance our development is we may really need to look at sort of flipping that. Now, one of the benefits is on the other side of 1518, going from 1 unit per 5-acre to maybe sort of 10,000 square foot lots or something, is that's closer to where the South Schertz sewer plan is coming in, and so in some ways is easier to serve. But the real idea is it becomes a way to balance, if I'm losing this development over here, making up for it so we're a sustainable community going forward. But I'm being really blunt. This is the biggest change in my mind in the whole plan, and I'll be very blunt and frank. Schertz has the biggest impact of the JLUs of any community that was part of it. The other communities have some north of the base. San Antonio's got a little corner down here. But frankly, as you guys can see, the bulk of the area south of the runway is in Schertz, and it's undeveloped, and that's the area that has such an impact. And again, you know, if the mayor wishes to have Randolph talk about why the push was made so hard, they can certainly do that. But I just don't want to leave this. And staff, from our perspective, didn't want to get out ahead of ourselves and have council say, wait a minute, what are y'all doing? Or P&Z say, wait a minute, what is it you're working on? Because there's a significant implication to these. Frankly, all of the other sort of stuff now seems fairly easy relative to that. Again, we've talked about noise and vibration with the noise stuff in the building code. There's some reductions in floor area ratios in some of the other areas so you don't get such massive buildings in certain areas. And then one of which is, again, as I mentioned, informing folks that Randolph is there. So if you come out on a Saturday, one of the recommendations is that we include signage in the parkway of the areas within those sound contours that lets you know, hey, there's an airport here. If you don't see them flying overhead, don't miss it. But again, the idea was to design a sign that frankly wasn't warning, 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 let you know what was going on. But I think frankly from what we've seen by folks in our community, there's a certain sense of pride that we have of our link to Randolph, and that many of the folks who live here in Randolph. And so the idea to some degree is kind of remind folks, you know, they've been around since 1930 doing this stuff. They were sort of here before us. We kind of got here built off of it. And it's not a bad thing. But again, need to plan for it. So again, what staff is looking for is not definitive pass the ordinance tomorrow. It really is staff, yeah, this is something that it's important enough we need to move forward with and see how we can find something that works for everybody with it. Now I will point out that one of the implications of this big land use shift is, as you know, we're working on the thoroughfare plan update. We kind of need to figure out if we're going to be making some big shifts here before we let them get too far. So we've held up the consultant because we didn't want them doing a bunch of work only to have it all change with some of these things. So again, fairly brief overview. It's not intended as carte blanche, but we just needed to get some sort of feedback of you know, where maybe what your reaction is on this and what you want staff doing.
So what I'd like to do, if it's all right, is invite Colonel Baldwin to come up, and anything that you would like to add, you're welcome to at this time. I'm going to then go to the Planning and Zoning Commission, then to council. They may have questions, and I'll invite you back up. But if there's anything you'd like to share at this time, or if you want to let us go, again, this is such an important thing. We need to give it all the time and deference that we can.
Well, thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Baldwin. I represent the 12th Line Training Wing for Colonel Eisler with the community. Actually, Brian, Mr. James got everything out there in an amazing way, so I really don't have anything to add. Your staff has been working with us extremely hard on all of this. We're extremely thankful for your leadership and working out and at least listening to our issues and the things that we're concerned about when it comes to operating in the interest of the public safety. Not only with this effort here, but I want to reiterate our thanks for the support that you had with the resolutions for the legislation, which resulted in 2 laws, which is one of the reasons why we're working together on compatible development going into the future. And then the other one had pertained to the work with the ETJs and things that you all are proposing, such as the signs. That's a beautiful sign, by the way.
It is a good-looking sign.
And that helps in a situation where the notification through the legislation didn't pass. So again, we just want to say thank you. We're happy to answer any questions if we can do that. But Brian stated everything just fine.
Do you want to maybe touch on the safety concern with planes, particularly south, and why we need a little bit?
Okay, sure. I brought some products, if that's okay. If I
feel free,
Mayor. Thank you.
It'd be better if you had a microphone, and if we have a portable one, we might be able to rustle that up over the next couple of minutes.
I can point. So at Randolph, we have some unique operations. I know we've been out there talking to the public here for about the past year here. So we fly high-volume trainer fighter trainer type aircraft to the tune of about 200,000 operations a year. If you would like to compare that, San Antonio International flies about 14,000 a year. So we're extremely high density compared to what you would get at your typical airport. The nature of our operations also is quite a bit different. The aircraft at San Antonio, when they take off, they'll try to take off in a vertical contour, as much of a vertical contour as they can go. Thank you. No, I appreciate it. At Randolph, because the T-38s are slightly underpowered, they have to fly straight out, and they have to gain that energy in order to be able to climb away safely from the ground, which requires a lower flight profile over any structures or communities located south of the base or north of the base in this case. The reason so much of the emphasis has been on Schertz is because of the weather here and our deconfliction from San Antonio International, 80% of our flights go towards the south. So it naturally puts that greater amount of emphasis on and more concern as Schertz is starting to develop. And we know that the community is great, and a lot of our airmen live out here, but we have to look at that situation as, you know, what is acceptable amount of risk for the 12th Line Training Wing. Mr. James also alluded to the issue with the birds. So for the past year, we've invested a significant amount of resources to try to deal with the bird aircraft strike hazard. Right now, we have somewhere between 8,000 and 10,000 white-winged doves that come and reside on the base. We've been cutting back trees, cutting down trees to help modify that habitat, and hopefully we'll start to see a reduction in that. But unfortunately, what happens, if you look here on the map, all those birds between 7 and 9 in the morning in large groups will depart and fly right over the south end of the east runway. And they happen to fly at the exact altitude that our T-38s are taking off. Last year in 2014, we had 15 documented damaging bird strikes, plus countless others. We recently had another contractor look at our bird situation, and they documented between 60 and 100 bird strikes this last year. The issue with that is as the aircraft are taking off at that low altitude, if they ingest those birds, T-38 engines are very, very sensitive to any kind of ingestion of something that shouldn't be there. We call it foreign object damage. What that will result in is potentially an aircraft, a heavy aircraft on takeoff, full afterburner, doing about 260 to 300 miles an hour, will lose its thrust because the T-38 is a hydraulically controlled aircraft. If you lose those engines, the pilot can no longer control that aircraft. And it's just going to fly, we anticipate it's going to fly pretty much in a straight line. And that's where our concern has been engaging with your city leadership, talking about those possibilities out there. And the situation here has been a little bit unique. In the normal air installation compatible use zone study, most mishaps in the happen in the landing phase, about 60% of them. Unfortunately here, because of the bird situation and because of our heavy operations to the south, that's actually been flipped, where we have the potential to create a greater hazard to the community if we lose one of our aircraft or if we take birds. So that's the main safety issue. And the other issue has to do with the noise, and I'll go ahead and throw that chart up here. So a chart similar to this was in Mr. James' presentation. But basically, because our aircraft are going to the south and we're flying the T-38s in full afterburner, the noise contours are much heavier over the southern areas of the base and in the communities. So you have anywhere between 65 all the way up to 79 decibels all the way through both excellent potential zones, which by Air Force guidelines and DoD guidelines is generally not recommended for residential development. And our main concern there is the realities of the ways that we operate. We know that the T-38 will eventually be replaced, and in the end, we want to have a good relationship with the community and ensure that we can continue operating here without noise complaints and things that may modify the ability for us to stay here over the long term. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
You bet. So what I'd like to do, again, is defer to our friends on the Planning and Zoning Commission. Commissioners, first comments, questions that you might have.
I guess I'll take the first bet on that. As far as I know, I'm still the only person in Schertz that lives on the southern end that's in this room tonight in any capacity. Maggie's down there too now. I love what the Air Force does. You know, like the mayor said earlier, to me the most amazing sound is on those occasional wind-still mornings when they get 8:01, the F-15s are firing up, and you can hear that rumble for miles. That's just an amazing sound. On the recommendations from the JLU study, I would hope that as a community we would support at the legislative level the real estate form notification. I think that's an important component, maybe more important than we realize going forward, to make sure that people are aware when they buy the homes that they're in a potential high noise area. The light strategy, I've been an advocate of that for years. I think dark sky compliant lighting should be something that we should implement community-wide, not just in the JLUS impact areas. And then as we look at changing our comp land plan for changing density, again, that's something that I think we should have done years ago to protect and preserve the mission that's going on at Randolph. It just makes sense, you know, and we kind of started getting close to that several years ago when we went through the Gateway study. We did put significant areas in southern Schertz into the newly designated Ag Conservation District area, which is the 5-acre minimum lots. And so that's just kind of an extension on that. As Brian was recommending, to maybe shifting development more to the other side of 1518. That's probably a good idea, and we need to keep it closer to 15, 18. I think that as a community, we also need to recognize and realize that as we get closer to the creek, that it's probably more appropriate to maintain the ag conservation districts in that area. You know, that area down there is and has been and will forever be prone to flooding. And, you know, I'll just point out again, as I have on other occasions, that, you know, when we had those floods in 98 and 2000, there were some places down there in southern Schertz, especially as you get down toward Trainer Hill Road, where Cibolo Creek was 4,000 feet wide. That's nearly a mile wide, and we can't, you know, allow zoning changes to occur that would put houses in those areas, even if it is well outside the 100-year floodplain. It's not something that I could live with and sleep at night, knowing that we're putting houses in areas that in the past have flooded and will flood again, but they're not in the 100-year floodplain. And that's all I have on that.
Couple of questions. Where did the one dwelling per 10 acres and one dwelling per 20 acres come from?
It originated, I believe, you know, as we started talking with Randolph Air Force Base as part of the JLUS process. You know, and again, Lieutenant Colonel can correct me, but the comments that began to arise at the JLUS discussions said, you know, look, a half-acre lot is a problem for us. That doesn't work. And as a city person, what I started immediately thinking about is, okay, that's great, I get that. What is appropriate, what's not appropriate? And so I think what you then had is a lot of dialogue as we sort of, everybody sat down together that was involved in that JLUS process, had Randolph talk to him and say, walk us through and have us explain what the hazard is. So in this case, you have a couple of things. One is, as you saw from the noise contour, and I'll point to it real quick, again, the recommendation is that you don't have houses within that higher noise contour. And then the other is understanding how a strike would, or how a crash might occur. And from that, the recommendation coming out of Randolph was, if you're asking what we think is appropriate, it's 1 per 10, 1 per 20. And then that's what ultimately the JLUS committee adopted. I will say this, that it was probably a city issue to say, look, if this is the recommendation coming out of the APZs, that area in between can't be left to develop at a denser level. It just doesn't make sense from a planning perspective or to provide services that you would have these low density areas, but in between them, you have a higher density. And so between was, I think, some city push, but outside it came from Randolph really, and ultimately the JLUS committee.
And so it came from Randolph, but is there a study or is there a DOD instruction or a DOD manual that says for this particular area we need 1 per 10, 1 per 20?
No, sir.
Or is that just an opinion from Randolph? It's
the position of Randolph. I believe the DOD study in terms of the normal is that half-acre minimum. But again, as I think everybody, you know, the JLUS meetings I attended and heard the discussion from folks, they said, look, if we're going to deal with this problem, let's really deal with it. Let's not half deal with it. Impose regulations on folks that create a safety issue for residents or people in that area, and also don't protect the mission of Randolph so that we're left in a situation down the road saying, yeah, this half measure didn't help us, and now we've kind of created more problems almost. And so I think the push, frankly, was to Randolph, tell us what you think is appropriate and what you think is safe. And again, if I don't want to hear the answer, I won't ask that question. But if we want to know the answer, we're going to ask the question. And even if we don't like it, and we kind of initially are like, okay, I wasn't thinking that, that's what we asked for and that's what we got.
So most everything in here is backed up by some kind of report, some kind of study, some kind of math, decibels, all kinds of stuff.
Some of the things are.
but the 1 per 10 and 1 per 20 is just an opinion of somebody that says this is what we think we want. There's no study, there's no report behind the 110, 120.
That is, as I understand it, that is correct, yes, sir.
Okay. Kind of odd in this, something that's so important and so key both to the Air Force and both to the city, it's kind of odd that it's not backed up by some kind of document, some kind of study. It's just the opinion of someone. Suppose all the leadership at Randolph leaves tomorrow and we get a whole bunch of new leadership. What's their opinion? Is it 1 per 5 or 1 per 50? Mm-hmm. It would be nice to have something that's going to affect our city so severely. Well, that may be an overreach, but it's going to affect our city to some degree. It would be nice to have something backed up by a regulation, a document, a directive, or some sort of study like we have on all the sound and, you know, all the other bird strike, all the other documents we have. Mm-hmm. We can relate to a study. This is related to nothing but an opinion.
Yes, sir.
The other thing, one of my pet peeves in the whole thing is, and for the Colonel's knowledge, I'm a pilot. I flew at Randolph a lot. I flew all over the place. So I'm aware of all these requirements. But when you drive in the main gate at Randolph, there's a sign that says, Randolph is a tree sanctuary. If you're so concerned about BASH and reducing bird hazards, I think we need to do something about that tree sanctuary bit and get rid of that. You said that Randolph is cutting down trees. I don't know where they are. I haven't seen any. But I can certainly assist, and I could probably come up with about 400 trees that don't serve anybody any purpose whatsoever. And when I lived on base, I wanted to get a nuisance tree cut down. It took 5 years to get permission to cut the tree down. So I think if Randolph is really serious about this, let's do your part, and let's start lopping some trees.
I'd be happy to address.
Feel free.
Thank you, sir. I'm glad to hear that you're a pilot, and so you have some great understanding about the issues that we're concerned about. So to address your first question with the density, this is a unique situation. The Air Force and DoD guidelines currently call for 2 houses per acre in accident potential zone 2. What they don't account for is a BASH problem like we have here, bird aircraft strike hazard problem like we have here. When you take the air installation compatible use zone study, and I can talk a little about here, the criteria that they use to come up with those land use guidelines is defined here. 61% are related to landing operations, 80% are by fighter trainer type aircraft, 39% are related to takeoff operations, and then, let's see, what's the other one that's significant here? Those are mainly the significant ones. With our documented strikes on takeoff in the T-30, which aircraft did you fly, sir?
Both.
Both, okay, so then I don't want to, I just want to make sure I'm talking at the same level here. Then you're familiar with the way we have to take off at low altitude with the T-38. We're hitting those birds constantly. So we know we have a higher, and we had the Marsdale Day group today actually just finished their study of our main issues at Randolph, and one of them is encroachment, and combine that with our #1 issue as being the BASH hazard. So they actually said that this study that came up with the 2 houses per acre is actually invalid in our case. And that's one thing we've been trying to convince Air Force leadership about, because it's a unique situation. It doesn't exist right now. And with this type of operation, with this type of growth that the city is very blessed to have experienced recently, and with the white-winged dove population, which is, by the way, in their assessment, is starting to settle further north and from Mexico, north being San Antonio. So in their assessment, this is going to continue to be a growing issue. So our interest, when we look at it, and you look at the factors out there, and for the commander's risk assessment, our interest is to be able to launch those airplanes and reduce as much as possible the possibility that if an aircraft goes down, that it would hit a house. We want it, if that was the case, to land in a field. So we initially asked Schertz, we said, please don't put anything there. And the city, looking out for its residents, you know, has to be able to do some sort of development. So, like I said, our interest is just keeping the density as low as possible because of our known risk factors that exist here. As far as the tree question that you had, that's been looked at. So we spent about $1 million last year cutting back trees. They haven't cut down all the trees, but they've cut back a good portion of them, and they've been cutting out, and I think they call it depredation, where they're taking out most of the canopy on the inside to take away that habitat for the birds. The trees actually serve an important purpose on the base. We're talking about 1930s era buildings, and if you lived on base, you'll know that the homes there are of the same era, and they require that tree cover to help with energy, keeping energy costs and consumption down. So yeah, it's called, the sign I think you're referring to is something Tree City USA or something of that nature. But they do serve a practical purpose on the base. And that option has been looked at, and for several other reasons, it's been deemed complete removal is not a feasible option.
I was by no means suggesting complete removal, but if you come in on the east gate, for example, those trees aligning the street on the east gate, they serve no purpose for anybody. There's no houses there. In fact, all the housing that was torn down along the main entrance on either side, there's no more houses there. So, you know, what do we need the trees are nice, but if they're causing a problem, then serious thought needs to be given to taking them out.
Yes, sir. Well, I can tell you that, let's see if I have I don't know if I have a chart here with the base on it. Base housing is here, right in the middle, if anyone is not familiar with the base. That's the primary location where the birds are residing. Now, they do reside in the peripherals. And you know, there is some habitat out there, but this habitat is being reduced. And another effort that we're doing is they've started taking T-38s off on the other runway in the morning to help mitigate some of that. They've delayed takeoffs between 7 and 9 a.m. to help also mitigate some of that threat out there. And they are actually, we're supposed to be getting a bird radar here in the next few months, which will give us a better indication about exactly how bad the bird problem is. But there are active efforts going on, and it's primarily to protect the residents living out there. It's also to protect our pilots, and it's also to protect our assets, as it's not a good deal for the taxpayers to be buying new aircraft on a frequent replacement basis. So obviously there's several reasons why we're trying to address this, but the principal reason is ensuring the safety of the community.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Council? Comments, questions?
Mr. Mayor, I just want to kind of comment on Mr. James and Lieutenant Colonel up here.
Yes, sir.
I think it'll be a very good idea to get with base and see what they really want, draft something, bring it to us. We've got to keep in mind with homes, if we put homes, it said on the APZ-2, 1 unit per 10 acre, the closer the homes to the base, all you're doing is you're inviting more birds. That happens, you know, that you're just going to create more problems up there. But you know, they have really enough hard time trying to protect us and make sure we're safe. I'd really recommend that y'all discuss and draft something that's very unique and acceptable to them, because after all, we have to look at it. When we look after them, we'll look at after our interest at the same time. So,
yes, sir. And just to be clear, Councilman Azouz, I think what what made it into the JLUIS document is what Randolph has a comfort level with. So what we've presented to you, which is in the APZs to 10 acres and 20 acres, they have a comfort level with. And so if we were to implement this, what we would come back with is something consistent with that. Yes, sir.
That's something that we need to make sure they're absolutely unequivocally comfortable with. Then with the solar panels, you know, when you look at a solar panel, I don't know if some of y'all have driven down 410 in maybe early or mid-90s, down 410 and that building to the left as you're going towards San Pedro and Blanco. The glass that's used is similar to the solar panel glass. Yeah. Now, that you could get blinded at least a mile away if the sun hits it correctly. So in the solar panel for the homes that's going to get built, it depends on where the takeoff and the landing in Randolph, instead of them tilted. So we want to make sure they don't hit that pilot taking off or hit them coming, regardless of the distance.
Yes, sir. And
it's a mile distance almost.
And just, you know, Colonel Baldwin has been kind enough to send me more information than I can ever imagine on solar panels, yes, including links to a website that I assume the military contracted with that really is sort of a program that you plug in information and it tells you whether it's a problem or not. So again, I think from a staff perspective, this one is simply one of those. It's not saying you can't do solar panels. Yeah. If you do them, you just need to do them the right way, and we don't anticipate this to be real problematic.
Good. Well, thank you.
Mr. Edwards?
I think it's a simple equation, economics, guys, reality here. If we decide to leave it the way it is and not make the changes that are being recommended, we'll be up here in 3 or 4 years talking about BRAC, base realignment and closure, and how we're going to react to that. So it's kind of an economics equation for me. We all enjoy a great quality of life in this city, but we also realize that tough decisions come to those who are here for the future. We have to make a decision. We don't have to make it tonight, but we do want you to go forward and bring us more recommendations. But I would simply say, let's be keenly aware that back when Kelly closed, people said it could never close. Oh, it's too big. It's got the C5. It's never going to go anywhere. Brooks City Base. Well, it's Brooks City Base now. You know, aerospace medicine. Oh, it's never going to go anywhere. You know, it got too much land. Guys, it can happen. It can happen. So we need to be friendly toward our military members out at Randolph. That's extremely important. You don't want headquarters to just disappear. You know what that would do? And as a matter of fact, Mr. Mayor, I think we ought to be trying to find a way to engulf and bring in more missions from other military installations that are closing down. That's what I think we ought to be doing. We ought to be supporting it from that standpoint versus trying to be reactive, saying let's do this. Let's look at making it larger. Why not? That's the big, hairy, audacious goal that you hear Jim Collins talking about. Mm-hmm. That's from good to great. That's what you want to have happen. You don't want to sit back and be reactive saying, you know, maybe we should, maybe we shouldn't. Mm-hmm. We have to go forward. Mr. Mayor.
Mr. Thompson.
Appreciate the land use study. Recommendations, very practical. I just have a few thoughts. Definitely agree with amending the real estate forms. I think full disclosure is something that is going to be in the best interest of everybody concerned going forward, and would urge us to do what we need to do that as quickly as possible. One of the questions I would have concerning Laurel Heights, what about the current developers? Sure. How do we, if a person has bought 50 acres, being able to plant it at a certain density, and now we say they can't, we're going to have to deal with that. So, you know, whatever you thought about that, we don't have to discuss that tonight, but that's just a question to consider going forward. I appreciate very much Mr. Dolly's comment about moving to the other side of 1518, but being aware of the floodplain. We've all seen instances where people rebuild in accident-prone areas, and The one thing I would like to see in all this, the abridged version of the JLU study of June 2015, it had 78 pages of recommendations of strategies involving 14 cities.
Yes, sir.
If possible, yeah, I was aware of that going through it. I'd like to see a pared down version where we could see the recommendations that impact Schertz.
We have that. Bear County has provided us, so we can send that out to you this week.
That way, just make it easier
Yes,
reading.
sir.
But I think overall, this is something that I would urge that we move in the implementation of adopting.
Mr. Fowler?
I think that the one thing that I'm not concerned with, but the thing that we need to look at, on moving the Adela switch, changing from 5 acres on the east side of 1518, putting that over here, will that satisfy the needs there for the Air Force if we make that type of switch?
Not a direct switch for the current land use. So again, to be clear, what we would do is we would take the areas in the APZ2s,
Yeah.
and we would go to 1 unit per 10 acres or 1 unit per 20 acres. Some of those, again, areas don't really have restrictions on density. Others, it's a ½ acre. So it's a very, very low density over there. From a city perspective, and this is Les Randolph's issue, but when we look at that and say if we have such low densities in the entire part of southern Schertz, that can create some challenges for us. And so what we're saying is that, ironically, where we had proposed low density, not quite that low, but 1 unit per 5 acres, is the other side of FM 1518. And so what we would say is go a higher density. Not sure what that is. It may not be 10,000 square foot lots. It may be 15,000 square foot lots. Who knows? That we have to work through. And certainly we would want to stay away from those areas where we need to stay away. But the idea is to capture some of that lost density over in that area. Because if you recall, the gist of our gateway plan was we want sort of housing for everybody. We want to maintain some rural areas. We want to maintain some kind of ranchette, large lot stuff. But then we want to allow some suburban style areas. And so again, ironically, it's just sort of flipping those a bit and going a lower density. So again, what's in the JLUS would be what we would have proposed. What we do on the other side of 1518 isn't in the JLUS. That's something that staff has been analyzing and will continue to analyze, and certainly look to our Planning and Zoning Commission for input to say, okay, what is an appropriate lot size? I don't think anybody's going to say let's do quite as dense as we normally do. I think what they'll say is do less dense, bit bigger lots, but something that's practical that builds off the sewer that's going to be there that can support that.
Do you foresee in the development of, say, Crossvine right now, that, you know, they got a phase 3 or phase 4 coming, it could be basically commercial, that commercial would be moving to a different location?
No, I will say this. We do have an area of the Crossvine, a future development that's proposed in the APZ2 that is zoned for ½ acre lot size minimum. And so that's problematic. That's what we want to avoid. Now, credit, and I saw him come in here to Chris Price with the Crossvine. You know, when Randolph said, oh, this is such a huge problem, what development do we have that's pending there? We said, well, we've got Crossvine. And that was really disconcerting for them. And we frankly, I think at the staff level said, actually, if we have to have this, this is probably the developer that we want there to have this problem with, because I think he's most invested in our community from what you've seen he's done. He most understands the importance of the military, and frankly, when we sat down with him, he said, then let me pull that area from my next master plan so we can start having conversations about what we do about that. Now, again, to be clear, as I think Randolph was made clear, as Bear County was made clear, as the city was made clear, you know, they have that financial investment that they've made in that area, and they can't just say, well, don't build anything there. But I think everyone has acknowledged how important this has been, what we've heard from Bexar County, what we've heard from Randolph, to try to sit down and work with some creative solutions. And so we continue to work with the folks in the Crossvine to find a win-win solution for that area. And so again, you can see how long this study has been going on, and you can see how long this developer has said, I'll pull that from development, let's find some solutions. And so again, we are trying to think outside the box. We're trying to go good to great. It's not a city problem to solve. This is going to involve a number of partner organizations and everything like that. So again, to be blunt, when you read editorials in the newspaper from councilmen in San Antonio talking about how big a deal this is, well, we're probably going to go a call into them and say, okay, so you're right, it's that big a deal. What do we do to help? What do we do to all work together?
Say, where's
to find
his
a
checkbook?
solution? And that's probably going to be part of it, to find some of those solutions, because again, there is a real problem here for the developer that we have to address to find a solution. But again, if we all work hard enough on it, if we're all creative, if we get everybody at the table, you know, I think we're all confident we can get there. And so that's a blunt answer. So again, frankly, we got lucky in that we had probably the best developer we could as a partner to say, wow, yeah, I don't want to create that problem. Let's pause and let's find a solution.
Thank you. John, anything? All right, well, so this is not a new issue. It's not something that showed up recently when I was first elected 10 years ago. I think it was the second or the third thing that was explained to me. The first one was where to show up for a meeting. And the second or third one was, let me explain the APZ to you and why it's important to the city of Schertz. We've got a couple of thoughts here. And this is one of the most complicated issues that this council and previous councils and the Planning and Zoning Commission and previous commissions and staff have had to deal with. Part of our problem is because the north, Universal City is already built out. They can't fly out north anymore because of all the development that's there. So care wasn't taken at the time that needed to be taken, and there's an issue there now. So it kind of falls to us, whether we like it or want it or not. To Commissioner Broad's points, a lot of this could be alleviated if the Air Force had unlimited money. Unfortunately, they're not given unlimited money by Congress. Or they could upgrade their housing, they could cut down the trees, they could save the human pilots and let the birds fly somewhere else. That money's really not available. So that's a challenge. The other challenge that we have, too, is we have land that's owned by families in that part of the city that have been there since before the Air Force Base was around. And now we're going to go and tell them that when it's time for their descendants to sell that property, we're going to pretty severely limit that use. Now, is that the right thing to do in the aggregate for the community as a whole? Probably. But let's not lose sight of that either. You tell somebody that they can only put one house on 20 acres, one house on 10 acres, you're severely limiting what that family can do with that asset. We're going to go down there and tell Bobby Graves that you're already out of compliance and you can't build anything else. Well, these are the folks that live amongst us. So we think very carefully about to what degree we limit development, and with the same fervor and consideration that we consider doing everything we can to preserve the mission, and to Mr. Edwards' point, additional missions. We should be out there trying to get our unfair share of missions brought to Randolph for the future. This is, it sounds easy to sit here and say, sounds great, let's do it. Drive down there. Go talk to a couple of those families. It's a complicated issue. I would say that I applaud the work that's been done by staff. We're probably getting closer now than we ever have been to defining what will preserve the base. But if you think about what we've done over the last 30 years, too, we have done everything that the Air Force has asked us to do, and now the Air Force, and I understand why, and this is not an indictment of the Air Force by any stretch, are coming to us and say, hey, we kind of didn't have it right, and we need you to take one for the team. Think about those things. Think about those things as we make this decision. This is not a simple decision that we're making. Understand, too, to Commissioner Broad's point, this is someone's opinion. This is today's opinion. We've been shown already that we can be given direction. We can implement that direction believing we're doing everything we're supposed to do as a community to preserve the mission of the basin. It can still be wrong, really through no one's fault. Think about that as we make this decision. There's another side to that, too, that says that, listen, if we go ahead and we do the 1 per 10 and the 1 per 20, and Congress comes along and says any way that it's time for the base to go away, well, then we'll go back to normal development, and the landowners will have their bite at the apple, and we'll all get together and see what we can do with that land. But, man, it's a tough one, guys.
Yeah.
This is one of those very few occasions where I'm glad I don't have a vote unless there's a tie. I'm not sure what you're going to do with it. It isn't easy. That's all of my commentary. I don't want to get any further, and I'll spend an hour talking about something that probably needs me to shut up about it. That said, Commissioners, any other further comments that you'd like to share on this one? This is, man, I wish there was a simple answer, but there's not. There's not.
Oh, but I think your comments, Mayor, were bringing up the past were the ones that we're all familiar with, those of us who have lived in the area here long enough to span a decade or two, realize that our concentration 20 years ago and until fairly recently was basically to the north.
Yeah.
And the folks that lived, like Mr. Dolly, to the south didn't worry about anything because the city wasn't paying any attention to them. Basically, they were happy to be there in their ranchettes and their small farms, if you will.
And they're pretty much united and said, leave us alone, we're good.
That's right.
That's right.
And it's only till relatively recently, from a planning, strategic planning standpoint, the city realized that, hey, we're pretty much built out. So we've got a lot of land to the south. That's where the building's going to be. So that's where developers began to focus. And I think the timing really on this is extraordinary because we haven't gotten too far afield to the south, although we've had many developers recognize that's where Schertz's future building can be, so let's get a piece of it. But we haven't gotten too far afield to where working with the Randolph folks can bring us to a point where hopefully there's a win-win in this, and the city benefits as much as the Air Force does.
Indeed, and one of the unintended consequences of building a great community like we built in Schertz is now there's demand. Now more people want to live here than wanted to live here before, and with the lack of land that's around us, that demand goes higher, that land value goes higher, that some of those families look at it and say, I have to sell to a developer. I would be irresponsible not to. I can take care of my family and my descendants for the next 99 years if I sell it at these prices. We've created that environment, and good for us, right? As a community, we've created that demand, but gosh, that creates some cascading problems that are tough to figure out. So, Mr. Fowler?
You just brought up a point that I think we need to just hit on. Back about 2007, that time frame, we tried to annex down south some land, and we had many of the homeowners down there that came and told us that we have been here for 50 years, 100 years, and it's going to stay in my family forever.
Yes, they did.
And after that discussion and the decisions that we made at that time, if I remember right, it was about less than 2 years later that they began selling off the land. They said there's going to be there forever in their family. So I think we've seen a change from the idea that we want to stay here at all costs to now that they realize that there's money to be made and brought that land up, in value, and now it looks like the people considering that land as commodity. So, and that's the reality of where we're at, and the people that had bought that land with the idea that they could make a bundle later on is, I call that the risk in investing. So that's kind of where we're at, and that's what we're going to be stuck with in the arguments we're going to be having. So I just want to make a comment about that.
You bet. Mr. Edwards?
Just a quick question, Colonel Baldwin. Has the Army Corps of Engineers ever come out and talked to you guys about maybe joining forces and actually looking at the Cibolo Creek portion that Mr. Dolly's talking about? I mean, I don't believe that it can't be done. I really don't believe that. I don't believe it can't be done. I think if we take the Army Corps of Engineers, they take a look at our Cibolo Creek issue, we can defer some growth over to that side. Now, will it be a massive undertaking? Yes. But I think it can be done. I just think we ought to at least entertain that. That's what the Army Corps of Engineers is for.
Well, sir, it's a great point. I'd like to back up just for a second. First, I want to say that we're extremely sensitive to private property rights. We're extremely sensitive to the issues and the challenges that this has presented to Schertz. We're extremely sensitive to the issues that's presented to the developer of the Crossvine, and we're very, very thankful for the cooperation, at least willingness to hear us out and do what you all can for the situation. And you said it, Mayor, there's no money there. Of course, the DOD isn't out there trying to buy up land that probably most U.S. taxpayers don't want to own. Yeah. And we have to take that in consideration, and frankly, we are depending on Schertz at this point to help us come up with those solutions. So, and all the stakeholders that are involved, we're not interested in forcing anybody to do anything. We don't think that's in anybody's best interest. So, we're definitely after solutions that will benefit everyone involved, and we appreciate that. As far as the Army Corps coming out and doing something, that's something I can certainly bring up. I think what Schertz is proposing, it sounds great. It would help us greatly with the questions of density where we're launching our T-38s and our T-6s. So I'm not advocating for any particular solution, but it sounds like development out towards that area would be very, very helpful.
And I really do believe that it benefits everyone if the Corps of Engineers come out. If nothing else, just take a look at it. If they can't do it, we'll say fine. Yeah, but if we don't ask, we'll never know.
Yeah, I'd be happy to look into that to see.
Yeah, and please understand, I was not. First of all, I'm not backpedaling. What I want to say is this: sometimes it's my role in the middle seat to play the foil a little and to kind of make sure that. Because it sounded to me like you guys ready. Let's go. Hold on. Careful. Let's think about everything that is in this big bucket we call the potential solution. So listen, we're committed to the Air Force Base. This city's been committed to that base from day one, since before we were incorporated as a city. Most of us on the dais here have some direct tie to the military. My brother's active Air Force. You've got two boys at the U.S. Military Academy, others that have served, and folks over here that have served. Man, we want to find the way, because we want the base here into perpetuity, not just for the next 50 years. It is a complex situation, and again, I want to reiterate, we are committed to protecting the mission, and frankly, again, as Mr. Edwards said, to growing the mission at the base to include everything possible until we run out of room. It's a tough order to get all that and get it done with the tools that we have at hand. So, commissioners or council, any other comments or questions?
One final comment, Mr. Mayor. As we continue to work through this, we know that we're going to make some sort of changes in our land use plans to try to accommodate and help Randolph. And one of the things that we've done as a community over the last few years is to make sure that we include the public. And a good example is this recent with the building code changes, how we were ready to implement it. We stepped back and we said, hey, wait a minute, let's get some more feedback. And I just hope we'll continue with that, that when we get to that point, that we go out of our way to reach out to the people in the southern Schertz area to give them the opportunity to provide us that feedback. It may make it a little bit harder and it may make it a little bit more difficult, but I think when we get through the end of that process, it'll be a better decision.
So I don't want to venture off point. I have to be careful because of the Open Meetings Act being what it is, but it sounds like that's a good opportunity for the type of workshop discussion that we'd like to have with a meeting that we set up in the southern part of the city, be it at Corbett or be it elsewhere. Maybe that needs to be without decision at that particular meeting, but primary to our discussion, the thrust of a meeting that we have in that part of the city, well advertised, well in advance, and get the commentary and feedback from the residents. Who knows? Maybe they'll look at us and say, why are you having trouble making this decision? I'm good with 1 per 20. We'll see. We'll see. All right, if there's nothing else on this one, and it looks like there's not, then the next item on the agenda is the adjournment of our special joint workshop. And again, if there's nothing else on these before we do that, then the council stands adjourned as to the workshop.
And Planning and Zoning likewise stands adjourned as to the workshop. It's 7:47.
Very good. I would like to do two things. We have two items that I would like to get to, and then I'd like for us to take a short break. The first item is the presentation of the Guadalupe Regional Medical Center Prescription Assistance Program report. Dr. Riggs has been waiting for us for a long time, and the hearing of residents. So if I may, I'd like to call our regular session of September 15, 2015 to order. I'd like to move immediately to the hearing of residents. Is Robert Hickernell still here? I think we went long and he may have left. Hopefully he'll send me an email or give me a call about his question regarding ATF forms. And then if there's no other resident that's here that wishes to address the council, I want to move then to the presentation of the Guadalupe Regional Medical Center Prescription Assistance Program report. Mr. Waite, Dr. Riggs, let's get that squared away so that Dr. Riggs rather, can go back toward Seguin. Thank you for being patient with us. I really do appreciate it.
Well, it's very educational. I appreciate it.
I hope it was educational, not too disappointing. But please.
Well, Mayor and Council, I'm here to present the last 6 months report for the Prescription Assistance Program. Excuse my voice, kind of allergy issues I can't deal with.
It's hit.
But you probably got the report in front of you, but just some highlights to it. The number of Schertz residents the last 6 months has actually increased by about 18%. So we're seeing more patients from the Schertz area coming over and taking
that's a big increase.
Big increase. Total number of prescriptions in the program over the last 6 months has actually increased by 21%. So it's just not Schertz, it's the whole Guadalupe area county that's actually taking advantage of the services at the hospital. The annual benefit to the Schertz residents is about $7,230 per person per year. And we charge them actually a $15 fee per month for the program. So for about $180, they're getting about $7,230 worth of product from the program, as well as improving their health and keeping down their other medical bills to the hospital and emergency room. Our expenses and income are pretty much about the same. We've actually had an increase in patients, so our increase in fees collected has increased. Along with that, we're collecting about $133,500 per year, which comes to pay for about 50% of the program at that point. And then the City of Schertz, which we really appreciate, the $5,000 y'all give us per year. It's a big assistance to us also. So we really appreciate your efforts in that regard.
You bet.
Other than that, I'll make it pretty brief, and if y'all have any questions, I'll be glad to answer them.
Council questions for Dr. Riggs? No, it's a great program. Listen, the folks, residents that take advantage of the program really benefit a great deal. We get a lot for our $5,000. That is a small amount of money for the benefit that we get. Again, thanks for being patient with us and staying. Sometime the council ought to think about increasing our contribution, but that probably is a discussion for another day. I should imagine that another $2,500 go a long way, but let's talk about that at a future time.
Well, one thing I'd like to say just in closing, anytime y'all are at the hospital and want to stop by and look at the program, you're welcome to. Give you my 15-minute tour, so.
That'd be wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you again for the presentation and the work you guys are doing.
Thank you.
Very good. All right, if the council's all right, I'd like us to have a brief 10-minute recess. It's that's about 7 minutes before the hour. Let's get back at 5 minutes after the hour. So hearing no objections, we'll have a 10-minute recess. And then share this with everybody, if you would. Councilman Sharp's wife, y'all remember we sent some.
Thanks again.
I should have left now. I should leave.
All right, I think everybody's in-house. I'd like everybody to come on up. We'll get started again. Where's Mr. John? I got 1, 2, 3. Yeah, I did. Yeah. We got 1, 2, 3. We got 3. All right, we're going to go back into open session now. It's actually past the time that I'd asked, so we'll start our meeting up again. Next item that we have on the agenda, we have announcements of upcoming city events. Mr. James, do you have that duty? You want me to come back around? Let me come back around to Mr. James, and we'll go to the consent agenda items first. First item that we have on the agenda this evening, we have the minutes, and that's a consideration or action regarding the approval of the minutes of the regular meeting of September 8, 2015. Item number 2, Ordinance 15T33, an ordinance by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a budget adjustment to the general fund to fund the Pickerel Pool liner replacement, repealing all ordinances or parts of ordinances in conflict with this ordinance and providing an effective date. And item number 3, Resolution 15R78, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing a sewer outfall easement agreement with 3GG Properties for the use, benefit, and control of the City of Schertz for the Woman Hollering Creek wastewater treatment plant and other matters in connection therewith. Gentlemen, any of those 3 that need to be considered individually?
Mr. Mayor, I'd like to just pull 15 or 78 just for clarification of what some terms are there that I'm not familiar with.
All right, very good. Is there a motion to approve the other 2 items on consent?
I will move that we accept them.
I heard Mr. Edwards first, so I'm going to assume that I've got Mr. Edwards making a motion,
Second.
Mayor Pro Tem Fowler as a second. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 5 ayes and no nays. Items 1 and 2 on the consent agenda passed. The next item that we have on the agenda now is item number 3. I've already read the caption, Resolution 15R78. I believe Mayor Pro Tem Fowler has a question for you, gentlemen.
Yeah, I know we're talking about I don't know what a sewer outfall easement, I know what an easement
The way
is,
I phrased it.
but a sewer outfall
Sure.
concerns me.
So yeah, it's an effluent outfall. So essentially what it is you have this treated effluent that's put back in, and so we need an easement from the property owner to put the treated effluent back into the creek on their property.
Oh, to put
The treated effluent
water, okay.
back into the
Gray
creek.
water, basically.
Yeah, it requires an easement agreement.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Okay. thank
And again, keep in mind, this is that temporary batch plant that serves the Crossvine development. When the South Schertz plant comes online and the trunk line gets up there, this all will come off and that easement agreement will go away.
Well, that being the case, Mr. Mayor, I move that we accept Resolution 15R78.
Second.
A motion from Mayor Pro Tem Fowler, a second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
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 5 ayes and no nays. Next item that we have on the agenda this evening is item number 4, Resolution 15R79, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an amendment to the WellMed operating agreement. Mr. James.
Thank you, Mayor. Again, as the staff report indicates, but for folks in the audience, a number of years ago, we entered into an agreement with WellMed, started with the Comal Foundation, for them to utilize space in our senior center. So, you know, they're in part of our building there. And they've been a very good partner to us. They've done a lot of things with the senior center. They're going to partner with the YMCA to provide some services for the operations going forward. The good news for WellMed is that their business is growing and doing very well. The bad news is they need more space, and we don't have it in that building. And so what they came back to us, while the agreement allows these extensions, they came back and said, look, we really need more space. We'd like to extend the agreement for just one more year while we go forward in that, and then we'll need to move into a new location. That actually works very well for us because, as you are all aware, Mr. Brockman has spoken numerous times about the need to grow and expand our senior center. So frankly, what this does for us is this will give us some room to grow into for that separate meeting room space and things like that. The year, again, allows us to kind of plan for it. So it really is a win-win. So again, what you've got is the one-year extension. A WellMed representative is here in case you have any questions. But again, this is probably the ideal. It allows us the space we need. It's been a good partnership. We anticipate it continue, and it gives everybody a little bit of notice on it. So again, we're recommending that we do the one-year agreement. And to be perfectly honest, if WellMed comes back a year from now and says, hey, we need another month or two, I think, you know, staff is certainly open to tweaking it, to giving them a bit more time. The idea is that we have some date to work toward now, roughly, to say, okay, what is involved in us taking over that space? What do we need to plan for? What do we need to queue up?
Great. Questions from council?
Mr. Mayor, move to approve 15R79.
Second.
A motion from Mr. Azuz, a second from Mr. Edwards. Any other comments or questions from council? Hearing none, then I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
5 ayes and no nays. The motion carries. Thank you, gentlemen. Item number 5, Resolution 15R80, a resolution by the City Council of the City of Schertz, Texas, authorizing an amended and restated development agreement for the Reinvestment Zone Number 2 Sedona and Crossvine Development Project.
Thank you, Mayor and Council.
James, I haven't seen you all night.
I know. You guys are going to miss me next week when you don't have council. We'll probably all just get together here on Tuesday night so we don't miss each other too much.
Reminded me, I probably would have shown up.
Okay. What we have before you, as you may recall, and some of you weren't here then, when the city created the TERS, the Reinvestment Zone Number 2, and again, we commonly refer to it as the Sedona or Crossvine TERS, one of the elements of that is the development agreement with the developer of the property that essentially lays out their obligations with regard to what they need to do, and then again lays out what our responsibilities are going forward. And as you guys all know, this was approved, the TERS was put in place, we had the first phase come online, that's what we call Sedona still, come on board, and at that point the economy essentially tanked. and everything sort of stopped, and there were some ownership changes out there, and everybody sort of just waited and waited and waited while the economy inched along and sort of came back. Again, Chris Price and his group came in, took over that. They worked with us to really redo the plan, and you can clearly, if you've been out there, see the difference. Again, certainly what's out there, the Sedona is perfectly nice, but this is something different than anybody else has. And so what we needed to do was essentially update the development agreement to reflect some of those changed conditions. The fact that we're now doing the modules with the master plan allows us some control over that we don't need through this agreement. The state came in utilizing the construction documents to build the bridge or the box culverts on 1518. So there's not that responsibility. The must-build roads change. One of the things is when they went to this open space concept, again, the agreement allows that to satisfy that cash payment. Rather than run through a bunch of calculations, we have the master plan. It lays out where those are, call that equal. And then one of the other big ones is, the agreement laid out that they were supposed to build us a fire station for a set amount of money. And what we've said subsequent is we need to build a fire station. It's going to cost more than that, frankly, not surprisingly. And rather than them use this money and us being responsible for the cost overruns, they essentially said, let us give you the cash equivalent, and city, you guys go ahead and build it yourselves, which is preferable for us. So again, there's not a net loss to the city. We get the cash from them. We put it in toward the fire station public safety facility to build going forward. So again, it serves the area. It's a win-win going forward. The developer is here to speak about it, and again, rather than continue to talk on and on, I'll answer what questions you have.
Council questions?
James?
Yes, sir.
The fire station we're talking about in 1518?
The fire station is the South Schertz Fire Station. Now, again, as you know, with the facilities master plan, part of the consultant's job is to identify the location. While we've talked about it along 1518, we've also clearly kind of said having it front to 1518 is probably not ideal, makes it very hard to get in and out of. Having it on maybe a side street is better. And so again, while we have the 3-acre piece of property, we probably will not use that. We'll probably, again, look for the best site and go with that, and then we'll figure out how we dispose of this piece of property if we need to down the road. And so, yeah, the fire station is the South Schertz Fire Station, though.
And you say the developer is going to give us the funds for that?
The developer is required to give us the funds. Again, what they were required to do before was essentially build the station for this amount of money, and the city had to pay any cost overruns. What they basically said is, look, city, you guys are better positioned. We'll give you the money, you build the fire station. And so it makes more sense.
So that's good news, of course, but we do have a bond issue that we putting forward for a fire station in 1518.
Yes, sir. And so this will supplement those monies.
Since we have money to supplement it, do you think we'll have enough money to put with the fire station? I don't see why we can't put a one-unit EMS medical response, because that is crucial.
Well, and what we've talked about doing, and again, the city manager will probably cut me off, but we've talked about the language. We didn't just say a fire station, a public safety facility, because the assumption is we want the ability for folks to sort of operate out of there. So, for example, if a police officer needs to go to work on paperwork, there's a room for him to work. If he needs to interview a resident, there's room there. EMS would have the ability to operate out of as well. Yes, sir.
So crucial.
That's right. We don't want to shortchange ourselves. So yeah, basically the obligation is they give us the money, we build it with the bond money added to it.
Well, Mr. Mayor, I move to approve 1580.
Second.
Certainly I have a motion from Mr. Azouz. I have a second from Mayor Pro Tem Fowler. Mr. Edwards?
Yes, since we just heard from Randolph, I think it would be probably appropriate to find out, are we to a point at this time, or maybe in the very near future, that we need to start looking at aviation type of equipment as well, in case there is an incident, at least at that location, perhaps?
That careful on that one. It's probably needs to be a separate agenda item for a later discussion, just because this is regarding the resolution.
This is just the amendment.
Yeah, the city attorney's giving me that look.
Thank you.
Let's put it on the
corrected.
agenda for future.
Withdraw my question.
Okay, so we don't even have to have it on the agenda. We're good. We're good. Mr. Thompson? All right, very good. I have a motion and a second. Any other questions or comments from council? If not, I'll call for a vote.
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, guys. Aye.
Aye.
Aye. 5 ayes and no nays, the motion carries. The next item we have on the agenda is the roll call vote confirmation.
Consent items number 1 and number 2. Motion was made by Councilmember Edwards, seconded by Councilmember Fowler. Mayor Pro Tem Fowler voted yes. Councilmembers Jesus, John, Edwards, and Thompson voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 3, resolution number 15R78. Motion made by Mayor Pro Tem Fowler, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Fowler voted yes. Councilmembers Jesus, John, Edwards, Thompson voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 4, resolution number 15R79. Motion made by Councilmember Jesus, seconded by Councilmember Edwards. Mayor Pro Tem Fowler voted yes. Councilmembers Jesus, John, Edwards, and Thompson voted yes. Motion passed. Item number 5, resolution number 15R80. Motion was made by Councilmember Jesus, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Fowler. Mayor Pro Tem Fowler voted yes. Councilmembers Jesus, John, Edwards, and Thompson voted yes. Motion passed.
Thank you, ma'am. Next item we have on the agenda this evening is item number 6, announcements by the city manager, Mr. Kessel.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. I have two things. One is kind of a small thing, but it's a big thing as well. A week or two ago, Mr. Brockman asked the question about a water fountain, or someone did, maybe, yeah, Mr. Brockman did over at the Playscape. It turns out that when the park staff went over there, the next day it was a valve that had been turned off for some type of maintenance and hadn't been turned back on, so it was a real simple fix. That got taken care of, but what's super nice is Sandy took the time to call Mr. Brockman, I believe, or meet with him and let him know so he wouldn't worry and feel the need to come back up here and say, what was the resolution? So sometimes those little things go a very long way with our citizens, and Sandy's great at that. So I just want to say thank you for doing that, going the extra mile. The other is we do have the cancellation of the council meeting next Tuesday. We also have the cancellation of the council meeting on October 6th, and that is due to the National Night Out. So while you won't be meeting here, you hopefully, as council, will be participating, so it's not like you have the night off on October 6th. That said, because we're missing so many different meetings, staff does have need of the October 20 council meeting, which is the third Tuesday, but we would recommend that date be preserved and we not go to that third Tuesday until November. We feel that we really do need to have that meeting for business. I wanted to make that announcement early enough that folks could make plans to be here on Tuesday the 20th.
Okay. Sounds good. Thank you, sir. Next item that we have is item number 7, request by the mayor and council members that items be placed on a future city council agenda. Anything that we need to add, gentlemen, that we don't already have listed or scheduled? No. Hearing none, I'll move on. Item number, sorry, Mr. Thompson, go right ahead.
A couple of weeks ago, some representatives of ACOG met at the chamber, and they requested the possibility of a presentation of an ACOG presentation with the Schertz City Council, especially as some elements of it involve some food for the seniors. I thought it might be very worthwhile in light of the discussion we've been having as a council to request that ACOG be scheduled at an upcoming meeting and make that presentation. It's one they've already given to the city of Selma, and to my knowledge it takes about approximately 5 to 7 minutes, but that this could be a very positive, informative session for us.
Sounds great.
Mr. Mayor, this is not a request for it to be in the agenda, but I just want to get some update on on a few items. One, I did ask the city attorney for a specific item on the pool, on the bond issue where it says a pool. The paper printed out 2 pools. I have quite a bit of residents that called and asked me why we're building 2 pools. We've awarded for 1, and the city manager, the city attorney gave me an answer, but I'm going to have him give us the answer altogether so I could hear it again on the record, to define the bond issue from 1 pool to 2 pools. And the committee told him the following. The committee for the bond issue, what did they advise us on that, my particular question?
I'm hesitant to get into that when it's not posted on the agenda, but I'm happy to do it when it's posted for the
Okay, Mr. Mayor, I asked for that item to be on the agenda for our next meeting.
Let's do it.
Okay, and also from John as our city manager, just kind of a brief on the compensation study for our medics and police and fire. When is that going to take effect? When they're going to get the retroactive pay? I thought it was like 2 weeks from the time we passed it to 3 weeks, but you might want to just give us an update.
How about if we let the city manager get back with you directly on that? Again, otherwise we just need to put that on the agenda for a discussion.
Okay, okay, I'll accept that. Thank you. I think the street, also, you could elect to get back with me personally on this, so you could elaborate on it in that compensation study on the street departments. I've had some folks kind of not excited about what took place, I guess, with their pay, but I'd like to get some more information of how we're addressing the street department's pay. And you could get back with me on that if you wish, or you could...
Certainly, Mr. Azusa, I'd be happy to sit down and meet with you on any and all questions you may have on the compensation side.
Thank you. Okay. And that's all I got, Mr. Mayor.
Anyone else, gentlemen? All right, we'll move on to the next item, which is item number 8, announcements by the mayor and council members. Start with Mayor Pro Tem Fowler.
Yeah, I very much enjoyed the luncheon today at the Chamber of Commerce, and the speaker, I thought that was very, very interesting when he talked about the millennium. And the thing that really caught my attention is that millenniums have very short attention spans. And one of the reasons for that is that during their lifetime, they watched a lot of TV. And if you notice that watching the TV, you had about 8-minute segments before you had an intermission. And during the intermission, they'll go off and do something else. So they've been trained to be attentive for about 8 to 10 minutes. I thought that was very something I had never thought about, but I thought that was good. And very good luncheon, too. Thank you. Very good. A lot of activity. And what I thought was good, I was glad to see the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce there, and how well things went at the meeting today, that they probably took notice, and I thought that was good. I was very proud of y'all. Thank you now.
Thanks, sir. Mr. Azus?
I certainly enjoyed visiting the VFW this last Saturday and seeing some of our active duty and retired, and it was a really nice ceremony, and you can't stop thanking them. I'm also hosting, I was asked by some of the POW representative and got a phone call hosting some POW either lunch or breakfast for I don't know how many, but I'll give you all an update later on the day. That's something that I like to do for them.
Very good, Mr. John. Mr. Edwards.
Mr. Mayor, I too attended the VFW for the POW MIA ceremony. Your absence was noted, but they also said that they knew you were not going to be there.
Yeah.
But it is always fun when you're there. Chamber luncheon today. Maggie's done a great job bringing in some great guest speakers. I tell you, this guy today, was it Chris Kraus? Craig Kraus. Craig talked about the millennials, and he said, you know, you don't have to worry about the millennials anymore. He said, just give it a few years, you'll be calling them boss. And I was looking at Lieutenant Colonel Baldwin, and I was thinking to myself, this kid is really polished. And Maggie kind of looked around. I thought, this is one of those millennials. So, again, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to actually talk about one other issue, if you don't mind, if you give me some leeway here. The issue of political signs. We need to discuss the issue of signs being put on public property, on city property as well. So we might want to just bring it up and maybe go over the rules of courtesy and actually the rules of policy when it comes to that, where the signs are being placed.
In that case, we probably should have a workshop session, a brief one, where we can allow staff to remind everyone of the provisions of that ordinance at the when staff's available to do that. You bet. Mr. Thompson?
Yeah, and I was at that VFW ceremony, as was Mr. John. Very much appreciated the desire to remember those. My father was a POW in World War II, and so there was a personal connection, so I appreciate the efforts involved.
Thank you, sir. I have nothing to add to any of that this evening. We have need for executive session tonight. City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.074, evaluations of the city manager, and City Council will meet in closed session under Section 551.074, evaluations of the city secretary and deputy city secretary. At this time, we will recess our open session, go into executive session, and return as quickly as we're able.